From NBC News election headquarters in New York, Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening, and if the current trends hold, this will be a triumphant night for the 50-year-old incumbent president of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton. We have now had 331 electoral votes at stake. The polls have closed in that number of states. We want to show you the states that are closing at this hour. 220 electoral votes are contained therein. This is a combination plate, if you will, on this election night. If you think of it as a menu, this is a very powerful group of states, all closing all the way down to the Southwest and Texas, as you can see, and Bill Clinton is winning more than the lion's share. He's the winner in Pennsylvania with 23 electoral votes. He's also the winner in the important state of Illinois, where he had his Democratic National Convention with the Daley brothers helping him a lot there. In Michigan as well, Bill Clinton the winner in that industrial heartland. In New Jersey, he picks up the 15 electoral votes there, according to our projections. Massachusetts, which remains secure for the Democrats. Missouri, one of those middle border states that was hotly contested in the early going. Bill Clinton the winner, his first stop after Chicago. Al Gore's home state of Tennessee in the Democratic column. Also the state of Maryland, right next door to Washington, D.C. Connecticut, the home state of Chris Dodd, the Democratic National Chairman, in the Democratic column. The state of Maine, Clinton won 4 years ago. He gets it again in the District of Columbia. Bill Clinton the winner there. Democrats can count on that. The state of Delaware, 3 electoral votes. That goes to Bill Clinton. Bob Dole is our projected winner now. He gets on the board for the first time in Oklahoma, which is right next to his home state of Kansas. He is also the winner in his home state of Kansas, and it's 6 electoral votes. So this is how the map is beginning to take shape now. Bill Clinton in blue, Ross Perot in gray, and Bob Dole in red. Bob Dole winning in the middle of the country, but the patterns are very, very strong for Bill Clinton. He is well on his way to the 270 electoral votes that he needs to win. Bob Dole is on the board now with 14. Tim Russert, it just couldn't be shaping up better for Bill Clinton at this hour. We still have a long way to go and important races out there, obviously.
But, Tom, the states you just declared for Bill Clinton, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, New Jersey, half hour ago, Ohio, they all have Republican governors. That was supposed to be an opportunity for the Republicans to hold that electoral base. They were states, so-called Rust Belt, no more. They're boom states, and the economy's good, and they opted for the Democrat. All right, we want to take you through some Senate races as well, because that's the other hotly contested chamber tonight, along with the House of Representatives. This was probably the sexiest race in the country. It was the governor of the state of Massachusetts against John Kerry, Bill Weld against John Kerry, 2 millionaires, 2 men of patrician backgrounds, and John Kerry is the winner tonight. He'll be going back to the United States Senate with a lot of help from young voters and from women. This was a race of a different kind altogether. They both kind of sunk into the swamp of negative ads in New Jersey, and Bob Torricelli is the winner in New Jersey. That's the seat that Bill Bradley has retired from. Phil Gramm didn't do very well in the presidential race, but he is the projected winner in Texas. He'll be going back to the United States Senate. In Illinois, the Democrats hang on to the seat. Paul Simon retiring. Richard Durbin takes his seat from the state of Illinois. In Tennessee, Fred Thompson, keep your eye on that name. 4 years from now, he could very well be running for president of the United States. He had an incompleted term that he filled up Al Gore's term, and now he has a full term of his own. In Oklahoma, James Inhofe goes back for the Republicans, so the Republicans hang on to that seat. In Michigan, Carl Levin, as expected, has won handily. He's our projected winner in Michigan. In Delaware, Joe Biden is a powerful voice on the Judiciary Committee. He's our projected winner tonight as well. In Mississippi, Thad Cochran, a Republican, he hangs on to his seat. And in Kansas, this is for the full term now, Nancy Kassenbaum is retiring. And Pat Roberts will win the full term. Bob Dole still has to there. Projected winner, big race. Everybody was watching this one, obviously. A rematch. Harvey Gantt, the former mayor, the African-American from Charlotte, loses to Jesse Helms. In Georgia, Max Cleland hangs on to Sam Nunn's seat. This is a big victory for the Democrats tonight as well. Big victory in North Carolina as well for Jesse Helms, obviously. Now, this is how the Senate is beginning to take shape. The Democrats so far, according to our tally, could very well pick up 1 Senate seat. We have 41 elected Democrats and 41 Republicans. There were about 6
votes. Actually, there were actually 6 votes separating the two parties, the Republicans with a 6-vote margin going into tonight. The Republican National Chairman is Haley Barbour. He's at the Dole headquarters now in Washington.
Understood.
He's there with his headsets on. Mr. Chairman, these are always difficult evenings when we show a map like that with Bill Clinton continuing to pile up votes in the industrial Midwest, throughout the Southeast, places where you'd hope that you would do well. Doesn't look too promising for your candidate at this hour.
Well, if in fact your projection based on exit polling in Florida is that it's correct that Clinton carries Florida, it's very hard for Dole to get there. Not very many surprises in the Senate races you've talked about, and House races. There's going to be a lot of close races tonight for the House and Senate. The likelihood is Republicans will not only keep our majorities, but actually increase our majorities. But if in fact, as you say, Florida goes to Clinton, then Bob Dole, who's made a tremendous, gallant, valiant effort and left no stone unturned, will have been the underdog, and while he's going to run well ahead of the polls, if he doesn't carry Florida, it's not likely he'll get 270 electoral votes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm told that you were part of that decision to leave the East and go west in the closing days of the campaign. Any regrets about that now?
Well, no, actually, I thought Senator Dole had the capacity to run a nationwide campaign. The idea that he had to choose between competing in California and competing in the Midwest and the East, I think, is a false idea that the press actually has kind of latched onto. There's no reason that you can't do both. And in fact, as you saw these last 96 hours, Bob Dole campaigned from coast to coast in many states that the press thought he would have to write off if he was going to contest other areas.
Let me ask you about women. We're seeing in almost all of these key races that the Republicans are losing by considerable margins to women. The women are going across the party lines, out of your party, to Democratic candidates, both at the state and at the federal level. Is that something that the Republican Party is going to have to address forthwith right after this election?
Well, we'll have to see what the polling actually looks like. I mean, let's face it, Tom, almost everything you've said is based on exit polling. When we actually see the vote, which right now is running about dead even nationally, 46 to 46, we'll have a little better idea, but there's no question there's a gender gap. There's no question that the Democrats' big lie Medi-Scare campaign, where they have spent millions of dollars with their union allies to try to deceive senior citizens and women into thinking that Medicare is being cut when in fact it's, as you know, increases under the Republican budget. Women are concerned. Older women are on Medicare. Younger women whose mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles are on Medicare. So these kind of very negative attacks that we've seen since last summer may well have taken their toll, particularly among women.
All right, thanks very much, Chairman Haley Barbour, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Tom.
Good luck. Well, Tim Russell, he talked a lot about Medicare, but the fact is that women are identifying a lot of other issues besides Medicare. They're talking about Bill Clinton coming out for mandatory 48-hour stays after they've given birth to a child, about education, about drugs, about abortion, taking a far more tolerant view. It seems to me that the Republican Party, however this election turns out tonight at the congressional or at the presidential level, is going to have to retire somewhere and say, what are we going to do to get our women back into the Republican tent?
Fairly or unfairly, Tom, the perception developed that the Republicans were excessive or, quote, mean-spirited. I believe the Democrats, and most commentators would agree, demagogue the issue of Medicare because it's going to go broke in 5 years. But the public had the perception that there was a trade-off between Medicare and tax cuts for the rich, and that the Republicans had, quote, gone too far. And we're seeing with the support for President Clinton in these swing voters across the Midwest, they are buying into the Democratic pitch.
All right. Tim Russell, we want to remind everybody that we still have a lot of important states that are still voting at this hour. We remind you to vote as well, especially in the Midwest, the Rocky Mountain West, and the Pacific states, where we've got those hotly contested congressional races and Senate races. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night, is being sponsored in part by GE. Visit us online at www.ge.com. GE, we bring good things to life. And by Prudential Securities. Knowing our investors helps us know what investments make sense for them. And by Ford Escort. It's new and it's nifty, made for the smart, the intelligent, thrifty. Decision 96, Election Night continues. From our election headquarters in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. We're back, and we can project now in the state of Alabama. It goes into the Dole column. It's 9 electoral votes. Bob Dole needs to see that kind of development on this big electoral map as it takes shape across the country now, because a lot of those states are beginning to be colored in blue for Bill Clinton. But Bob Dole down in the Deep South, he's our projected winner in the state of Alabama. We want to tell you as well that we've got, this is the electoral count now, almost 200 for Bill Clinton, 23 for Bob Dole. You need 270 to win. How do you get that number? Well, it's the full House of Representatives and the United States Senate, half that number. It's a very complicated system. It works very well, trust me. For governor of Missouri, Democrats go back to the State House. Mel Carnahan is the Democratic incumbent. He's our projected winner in Missouri, and the Democratic incumbent in Delaware, Thomas Carper, the winner there as well. Delaware has been, in the last couple of election cycles, a very solidly Democratic state. Rahima Ellis is standing by now. She's in Boston at the headquarters of John Kerry. John Kerry had a very tough race against Governor Bill Weld, the governor of Massachusetts. He's our projected winner in the United States Senate tonight. Rahima?
Tom, I can tell you that a short while ago, a round of applause and cheers were heard in this room when the word went through the room that John Kerry will be going back to Washington, so it seems, for a third term in the Senate. And I should tell you that this has been a very close and a very hard-fought campaign by two very much liked candidates. One of the things that people are saying, as you were pointing out about the negative campaign ads, they may have worked against Bill Weld. And here's what we're hearing in exit polls. They're indicating that 1 out of 4 voters thought that Bill Weld attacked unfairly, while 1 out of 10 voters thought John Kerry attacked unfairly. Now, in a contest what many people were saying was very close and was essentially a popularity contest, and may have come down to some people saying they didn't like the way that Governor Bill Weld was behaving. And besides that, Tom, the other important issue here is that people in this state seem to think that things are going pretty well. They like Governor Weld as the governor of this state. And in so doing, they have said essentially, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So maybe they're saying they want Bill Weld to go back to Beacon Hill and continue to finish out his term as governor. He's got 2 more years left. And in the meantime, they're going to send John Kerry back to Washington.
My guess is, Rahima, that we have not heard the end of Bill Weld, either in Massachusetts or in national politics, for that matter.
My guess is similar to that, Tom, because many people were saying that this was such an important race to watch because there's a thinking that this could be the launching pad for someone who's interested in presidential politics in the year 2000. And clearly it has been said that Bill Weld is interested in that. You know, the thing that's different about him is that he has not aligned himself as closely with the Republican Party. He has been a very independent governor and a very independent Republican, and that's what a lot of people have liked about him. So I think that regardless of what happens tonight, we will hear from Bill Weld again. All
right, thanks very much. Rahima Ellis tonight in Massachusetts. We can project now the state of Indiana in the Bob Dole column. That's solid Republican territory, although it has now elected a governor, a Democratic governor, 3 times in a row in that state. So the state of Indiana goes into the color of red. That's the Bob Dole column tonight as the national map begins to take shape now. Bill Clinton, 198 of the 270 electoral votes that he'll need to win. And Bob Dole is on the board now with 35. Most of Bob Dole's states that he has won so far tonight were the states that he needed. Jack Kemp with his wife Joanne and one of his sons watching now at his headquarters in California. He's made his final return there. He was criticized by some conservative columnists, but widely praised by others in the party for bringing dignity and civility to the whole process. Jack Kemp, we no doubt have not heard the end of either. He's 60 years old. That means in 4 years he could run once again in the year 2000. He is the kind of the happy warrior of the Republican Party. So Jack Kemp, who was a bit of a surprise choice for Bob Dole, went out and talked a lot about the importance of a tax cut and economic populism, but he never was able to attract to the Republican Party the people that he feels closest to, Tim, a lot of the people who are in the lower parts of the economic spheres in this country.
And Tom, it's interesting, Jack Kemp was going to be the outreach to minority groups, to new immigrants. In the end of the campaign, Bob Dole aggressively campaigned against for affirmative action, against some of the immigration changes, and Jack Kemp got a bit concerned about that. Looking at some of these early returns in states like Florida, you wonder whether or not Jack Kemp wasn't right in the very beginning of an inclusive Republican strategy. However, his unwillingness to be the pit bull, the attack dog, earned him a lot of criticism from Republican insiders. They expected that was part of his role as a VP candidate.
Yeah, and one of the arguments that he had, I think the most difficult making, obviously, was that we need to do something about this economy. He kept talking about it's the slowest growing economy in the 20th century. But all of our polls indicate people are pretty happy with where they are economically. They think the country's on the right track and they're better off now than they were 4 years ago.
Ironically, the last quarter, the economy only grew at 2.2, but the perception is the economy is very strong.
All right. We'll be back with more on Decision 96. More states, more elections for the House, the Senate, the governorship, and for the big enchilada, the presidency of the United States.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
We want to go directly now to the man who hopes that he'll be able to hold on to his job as the Senate Majority Leader. That's Mississippi Senator Trent Lott, Republican. Looks like he's got a lot of very close races around the country. Based on the projections we've been able to make so far, the Democrats have picked up at least one seat. What are you hearing from your wizards around the country, Senator?
Well, there are a lot of close races around the country, but I do believe we'll be able to hold our Republican majority in the Senate, and we still are hopeful we're going to pick up some seats. But there are a number of them, as you say, that are within the margin of error. The important thing now is, as you look at the return in the presidential campaign, I think the American people are really going to want that protection of against what will President Clinton be like in a second term if he doesn't have this Republican majority to keep a check, make sure he actually lives up to what he said he was going to do. You know, he's talked like a Republican. Now let's see if he's going to, lead like that.
But, Senator, based on what we've been seeing so far, there has been an overwhelming turn toward Bill Clinton for his second term. I mean, he's winning virtually all of the states that Bob Dole hoped that he would be able to win, that he needed to win, like Florida and Georgia and some of those other critical states. It's a big endorsement of Bill Clinton thus far, with the evening's not over, obviously.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see what the percentages will be, whether or not his percentages will be 50% or under. It's awfully tough to run it against an incumbent president, especially one that is talking, the Republican position. He talked about less government. He talked about less taxes and not a lot else, and that's an agenda that we believe in. But if he does win, the important thing is for us to do the people's business, and we're committed to doing that. We're going to work with the president of either party to have a smaller, smarter government that gives some tax relief to the American people, and we'll work with him. Or I still, would love to see Bob Dole in there, but that's not the case. We'll work with Bill Clinton.
Is there any greater, more important issue than Medicare? You couldn't hear that?
No. Could you repeat that? Is there any greater?
Very quickly, is there any more important issue than Medicare for you to deal with forthwith?
Obviously, that needs to be dealt with. I think there's been a lot of demagoguery and a lot of misinformation in that area in this campaign. We're going to have to address that, but the president's going to have to now provide some leadership to get the job done.
Senator, thank you very much.
Okay.
Back with more right after this.
Election night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again. It's now 8:30 in the East. We want to remind everyone, of course, in all the other time zones that if your polls are still open, please go vote. We are beginning to accumulate electoral votes, however, in the race for the presidency of the United States. Just one state now closing its polls at this hour. It's the home state of the incumbent president of the United States, the state of Arkansas. No surprise, Bill Clinton, our projected winner there. For him to lose Arkansas would be like Elvis losing his hair. He could go on, but it just wouldn't be the same somehow. Bill Clinton, we now color the state of Arkansas his home state. The color of blue. Bill Clinton is now past the 200 margin, on his way to 270, he hopes. Bob Dole with diminishing hopes now that he can reach 270 electoral votes. 6% of the precincts have been counted nationally. It's a very tight race in the popular vote thus far, but the vote that counts in this country is the state-by-state vote. We'll be watching to see whether Bill Clinton gets to 50% because he hopes that will give him a bit of a mandate. And we'll also be watching Ross Perot to see if he gets into double digits tonight. Tim Russert, how important is it for Bob Dole to keep Bill Clinton under 50%?
Bill Clinton has told his advisors, I want a mandate. I not only be the first Democrat re-elected president since Franklin Roosevelt, but no Democrat has gotten more than 51% of the vote since Lyndon Johnson. I can then go to the Republicans if they hold Congress and say, the people have spoken. They want an end to these investigations, an end to the assaults on my ethics, and the country with me. That's what Bill Clinton's hope is tonight, Tom.
There is also a theory, however, that if the Republicans begin to engage once again in a lot of investigations, that it will not do well for them 4 years from now, because the country and all the exit polling that we're seeing so far is saying, hey, let's get on with the business of solving the real problems that we have out there.
We saw at the end of last Congress a dual track. Achieve consensus, have accomplishments to point to legislatively, and still keep investigations going as well.
Obviously, the contest tonight for the United States Senate, for the House, is still going on. In the Senate, the Republicans hang on to a seat in the state of Kansas. Bob Dole, you'll remember, retired from the Senate. This was the race, the so-called B race in Kansas, and Sam Brownback will take over the Dole seat in the state of Kansas, a very hotly contested race out there. So this is how the Senate chamber shapes up at this hour. It will show you that we think the Democrats will pick up maybe one seat before the night is out. They have picked up one so far. We don't know whether that will hold throughout the evening. There are some races that are too close to call. Here's one in Virginia. This is called the Warner Brothers race. It's between Mark Warner, who was a multimillionaire telecommunications entrepreneur, running against another millionaire, John Warner, who is a Republican of the old school in Virginia. That race is still too close to call. We want to go down to North Carolina, where we have projected in that state that Jesse Helms will be returning to the United States Senate, having defeated for the second time in a row the former Charlotte Mayor, Harvey Gantt. And NBC's Frederica Whitfield is there. Has Senator Helms appeared tonight, Frederica?
Senator Helms has not appeared yet, but he is expected to. The supporters have filled the House here in Raleigh, North Carolina. They are celebrating the early report from NBC News that Helms has secured a 5th term. Of course, in Charlotte, North Carolina, where former Charlotte Mayor Harvey Gantt will later join his supporters, is expected to appear once he believes the numbers are final, once he feels confident that indeed he has been defeated for this evening. It has been a hotly contested race from the beginning, similar to the race, the contest between the two men in 1990. This has been a contest filled with negative ad campaigns, and of course, race has been an issue. And similar to the 1990 contest, it is Helms who wins, who takes this seat and returns back to the U.S. Senate. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, Frederica Whitfield, tonight in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the headquarters of Jesse Helms. He, of course, attracts a lot of money from across the country, and he got into some hot water because he was taking contributions from Taiwanese for his foundation at a time when Bill Clinton was under fire for taking donations not only from Taiwanese but also from Indonesians. A late projection in Kentucky. Big win for Bill Clinton. He won 4 years ago. There was a little bit of the delay in the projection tonight, but Bill Clinton is the winner in that middle border state. It goes now to the Bill Clinton column. 8 electoral votes there, so he begins to march toward 270 pretty seriously now at 212 electoral votes so far for Bill Clinton in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now let's go to the Commonwealth of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and the gentleman who is presiding over the exit polls for NBC News tonight, sitting there in a setting, I must say, that is beyond grand. NBC's Brian Williams, looking like some futuristic star. Brian?
Along with several hundred of my closest friends, Tom, who think I'm the projected winner in some state every time it comes up on the monitor behind us, I'm afraid. What we're seeing in terms of the congressional races as we look at the exit polling numbers that are coming to us tonight is an electorate pretty evenly divided, right down the line about how they feel. We asked voters how they felt about Republicans in Congress, the job they've been doing. 54% said they disapproved of the job they're doing. 46% approved. Of course, one of the most hotly debated issues on Capitol Hill these days and this year, Medicare and Social Security. 45% felt the Republicans would be more likely to reduce Medicare and Social Security benefits. And by the way, about 2/3 of the Democrats, 2/3 of the people we asked voted for the Democrat in their race. We also asked voters whether they're concerned that a Republican-controlled Congress will be too conservative. 44% said yes, but 51% were concerned that a Democratic Congress would be too liberal. So as the night is unfolding, we are seeing mixed emotions about what the voters want from Congress. And incidentally, there's several hundred people who have gathered here, smattering of applause here and there when a state is announced for Clinton. The Dole supporters, sadly, have not had a lot to cheer about. Tom, back up to you.
All right, thanks very much, Brian Williams. I feel like Big Brother over your shoulder there. Look at that. You got it all right. I was reading your notes, and you did it just fine.
That's right. Thank you very much. They're right here.
NBC's Tim Russert joins me now. Tim, I'm going to share with you some numbers on the economy. The unemployment rate in 1992 was 7.4%. It's now 5.2%. The stock market was at 3288 in 1992. It's now well over 6,000. Factory orders in the month of September alone were up about 3%, the biggest gain in several months. Yeah. 4 years ago, James Carville was saying it's the economy, stupid.
And
still is.
4 years later, that seems to be the dominant theme. Tom, as we talked about, George Bush ran for re-election in 92. The growth rate in the third quarter was 4.7%. People thought it was recession. There's a psychology at work. People believe the economy is doing well. Tonight, we have projected President Clinton in a whole string of states. The raw vote's coming in, Tom. He's winning big in a whole lot of states. Bob Dole should be winning a lot of traditionally Republican states right now. And as we sit here, states like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, none of them have been projected for Bob Dole. This could mean that if those margins for Dole are small in his states and the margins for Clinton are big in his states, who knows what can happen with Congress?
We want to tell you that in 1930, there was an extraordinary thing that happened. We don't think it'll happen this time. In 1930, the Republicans held control of the Congress of the United States, and they barely managed to hang on to their 12-year run of controlling the House. But before the 72nd Congress could be convened, 14 members, 14 of them died. 7 of them were members of the Republican Party. They had a special election, and the results were the Democrats controlled the 72nd Congress by 220 to 214. You can't hardly get information like that anymore. We'll be back with more of it right after this.
Decision 96, election night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
You're looking down on 30 Rockefeller Plaza there here in the heart of Midtown. This is NBC News, and coverage of Decision 96 is going on not just on NBC and at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, but on MSNBC as well as NBC in Asia and Europe tonight. We want to tell you that the United States Senate is shaping up as a very interesting race this evening. So far, the Democrats have been able to pick up 1 seat in what has been called the greatest debating society in the world. That's been open to some question here recently. The Democrats have picked up 1 seat, but there are a lot of them that are still being contested. Going into tonight, the Republicans had a 6-seat majority. If the Democrats get 3, that means it's a tie. It then goes to the Democrats because it now appears that Al Gore will return as the vice president of the United States, and he would cast any tie-breaking votes. But NBC's Lisa Myers, who joins us now and covers the United States Senate, that would be good news and bad news for Al Gore. The Democrats, if he is returned to that office, would have control if they get just 3 more seats. But at the same time, Al Gore, who has his own presidential ambitions, stay with me, Lisa, this makes sense now if I just follow it all the way through, would have to make some very tough votes.
Oh, some very tough votes. The list of issues that both the president and the Congress are going to have to deal with over the next 4 years are staggering. Medicare. Both parties are going to have to agree to slow the growth of Medicare. They're going to have to deal with other entitlement programs. You have the promise to balance the budget during this period. One of the things that, regardless of what the outcome is tonight in the House and the Senate, what is likely to happen is that the moderates in both parties are likely to be strengthened because neither party, Republicans or Democrats, is going to come out probably with a large enough majority to be able to set the agenda themselves.
Lisa, the Republicans have just picked up a seat now. We're able to project in the state of Alabama, where Howell Heflin is retiring, that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, a Republican, will be going to Washington, D.C. as the new senator from Alabama. So Trent Lott will probably be breathing a little bit easier at this hour because that was one of those races that everyone was watching.
Trent Lott was counting very heavily on the state of Alabama. The other race that he's watching very closely, the other highly endangered incumbent is Senator Larry Pressler in South Dakota. That is a seat that a lot of Republicans expect to lose tonight, along with the Bob Smith's seat in New Hampshire. But overall, the Republicans are hoping that as we move through the South and into the Midwest, they will be able to offset any of their losses in the Senate with gains down the road.
At one point, Trent Lott was talking about unleashing some investigations of fundraising and other matters at the White House. Do you think he'll pull back from that once reality sets in come January?
No, I don't. I think that he is seriously thinking about a select committee to look into campaign funding abuses. Senator Orrin Hatch, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has already said he's going to have more hearings on the FBI files, how 900 FBI files ended up in the White House, and he's going to have some hearings of his own on campaign finance. I mean, one of the reasons that the White House had a vested interest in hoping the Democrats regain control of the House or the Senate was to put the lid on some of these investigations that I think otherwise are inevitable.
All right, thanks very much, Lisa Myers. However, this evening turns out no one has come from a more distant place in American life than Bob Dole. And I'm not just talking physically or geographically. Bob Dole was a man born into a very poor family in the high plains of Kansas. His hometown is Russell. He tears up whenever he talks about it and whenever he returns there. And NBC's Jim Avila is in Russell, Kansas tonight with some of Bob Dole's friends who are watching all of this. Jim?
Thank you, Tom. Russell, Kansas, as you can tell from the noise behind me, has been tracking right along with the people and the race that's going on here. Their fortunes, in fact, are tied directly to Bob Dole. I'm with a couple of friends here, and I want to talk to Aldine Baker first, the banker first, about how you first met Bob Dole getting a parking ticket taken care of when he was a county attorney here many years ago. The fortunes that he has going now, how close is it tied to Russell? What happens to Russell if indeed he loses tonight?
Russell is very proud of Bob Dole, and they really have worked for him hard. I think it'll be a little adjustment. We've enjoyed the past year and all the media coverage that we've had, but we're a very resilient community, a conservative community, and I think that we'll just bounce right back. We've had misfortunes before.
All along the campaign, people have said that the country doesn't understand Bob Dole. What do you think the country did not understand about Bob Dole that you do here in Russell, Kansas?
I think that we are so used to hearing people and his humor. Most people don't understand his humor. And he is very kind and giving person and a humanitarian that a lot of people don't understand either.
Thank you. Also with me is the chairman of the Republican Party here and also a local businessman. The town of Russell had planned a lot of things if Bob Dole were to win. A library, more tourism. Are you concerned about if indeed he loses this election tonight, what would happen to this town?
No, this town will go ahead and has a good future. It will go ahead and make plans. Bob Dole's been in the Senate so long that it would be good to have a but a senatorial library. It's right along I-70, fit right in with the presidential libraries that are there.
Thank you very much. Well, Tom, they still have hope here in Russell, Kansas. They're watching the results carefully, and we'll be here with them for a while. Tom, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jim Avila. Tim Russert, one of Bob Dole's old neighbors, was talking about his great sense of humor. We didn't see enough of that, I think, in the course of this campaign. I think he delivered the single funniest line I ever heard in Washington at one of those closed dinners. He was talking about Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon all being alive, former presidents of the United States. Right. He stood up at the Gridiron Dinner and he said, we have these three former presidents, speak no evil, hear no evil, and evil. Talking about Richard Nixon, he brought down the House. It was a Bob Dole original, and everyone loved him for it, and yet he could remain loyal to Richard Nixon.
And gave one of the most moving eulogies at President Nixon's funeral, and President Nixon often reminded him of that line.
That's right. Well, by the way, Bob Dole got in a little trouble with tobacco, during the course of this campaign. At Harvard, those students in the Harvard yard this year, they said they had a big sign out that said, elect Dole Camp, free cigarettes. We'll be back with more right after this.
Decision 96, election night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. It's about 10 minutes to 9 now in the East, and this election night engine is about at full throttle because in just 10 minutes we'll have some very significant states of electoral poll closings and 102 electoral votes in the 9 p.m. poll closings in those states that are on the board right now. A lot of them are key states: New York, Arizona, Wisconsin, Wyoming. Places where Bob Dole has to win, or if Bill Clinton takes them away from him, the chances are very good tonight that he'll go over pretty swiftly that 270 magic mark. He's well over 200 at this point already. NBC's Maria Shriver is in Little Rock tonight. Bill Clinton is there, of course. And Maria, I gather that you can kind of sense the anticipation beginning to build.
Well, this place is beginning to swell. The VIPs are parading in. A lot of the people working for the president, Mike McCurry, George Stephanopoulos, have also started coming in here. People are excited. That is probably an understatement. There are a lot of big screen TVs all over here, which parade up the latest results, and everybody roars with approval, and they boo if a state comes up and says that it went for Dole and Kemp. Everybody here is excited about the president's impending arrival. They are looking forward to it. They are excited. This is their favorite son, and even though many people here today told me that this is somewhat bittersweet because they feel that even though the local boy made good, a lot of people who went to Washington with him from this state had their reputations tarnished. So it hasn't been a kind of totally joyous 4 years, but tonight they're trying to concentrate. Even those who aren't big Bill Clinton fans are trying to get in on the act of feeling good about Bill Clinton. A lot of people, Hillary Clinton, still very popular down here. A lot of talk by a lot of women that I've spoken to about wanting to see her and the role that she'll play in the next 4 years.
All right, thanks very much, Maria Shriver. Let's go to Tim Russert now. What do you think about Hillary Clinton? Here she did go back to the much more traditional role in this campaign, especially.
Tom, she disappeared.
Yeah, she really did.
We couldn't ask her any questions. She didn't do any major stumping. She made a really cameo appearance the other day in Ohio with the president. They realized that she was a liability, a high negative rating, particularly with independent voters, particularly male voters. I think in a second term, she's going to play for history, if there is one, not with health care, but try to find a way, perhaps education, perhaps children, a way of not being a co-president, but an activist first lady and advisor to the president.
And what do you think about the shape of the president's new cabinet? 4 years ago, he said, I want one that looks like America. It got him in a lot of jams because he kept trying to fill slots with different shades and different genders and different colors. What do you think will happen this time? Will he reach out to any Republicans?
I think it's mandatory that he reach out to Republicans and independents and try to heal the country, bring it together, and also neutralize some of these ethical investigations that are coming his way by trying to demonstrate he's being bipartisan and ask the same of Republicans.
All right. Well, Bill Clinton is in Little Rock anticipating what will happen tonight. When Harry Truman had his big upset in 1948, he slipped off with a couple of Secret Service agents and spent the night after a glass of buttermilk and a ham and cheese sandwich in a small hotel. Back after this. Tonight, it was a very dark evening in the living quarters of the White House for President Bill Clinton as the Republicans swept the House and the Senate and promised a revolution into the 21st century. Tonight, Bill Clinton proves his title, the Comeback Kid. He is our projected winner as President of the United States, re-elected for a second term, the first Democrat since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The 50-year-old man from Hope, Arkansas, who went off to Ivy League schools, eventually to England, avoided the draft, then came back and began the long climb toward the White House, running first for Congress, then for state offices. This is the headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas tonight. A night of triumph for Bill Clinton, for Hillary Clinton, and for the entire Clinton campaign. We're also looking at the DNC in Washington, D.C. That's the Democratic National Committee, which played an active role in this campaign by raising millions of dollars, some of them from questionable sources. It became a big issue at the end of the campaign. So we show you now the projection of Bill Clinton, our elected president of the United States, by winning in the state of New York, the 33 electoral votes there. Also in Wisconsin, in the heart of the Midwest, Minnesota. And Bill Clinton is the winner as well tonight in the state of New Mexico in the Southwest. And he's the winner in Rhode Island, just 4 electoral votes, but that's important to him. The projected winner in North Carolina, Bob Dole. And a moment to talk about Bob Dole, who also wins in Nebraska tonight and in the state of Wyoming. This proud warrior, severely wounded during World War II, a man who served his country so honorably and so well, not only in the Army, but in the Congress of the United States and in the Senate. His last valiant campaign comes to an end tonight. William Jefferson Clinton is our projected winner, 275 electoral votes. And Tim, if the pattern does continue, Bill Clinton will have a lot to lay claim to when he goes to deal with, if it stays a Republican Congress of the United States. There are a lot of states that are backing him up here tonight.
He will say the country overwhelmingly supported me. You laid everything out there in terms of my ethical shortcomings, and the people have spoken. Why don't you set it aside? They won't, of course, Tom, but President Clinton will make that case. Think back just 2 short years ago, Tom. There was, in effect, a vote of no confidence in Bill Clinton. For the first time, the Republicans won both houses of Congress, and tonight he's being reelected with an overwhelming Electoral College, at least, victory.
And you can see him moving very smartly in the last 2 years from left of center to right of center. We're going to move smartly now to Little Rock, Arkansas, and NBC's Maria Shriver, who is down there in the midst of what must be a very happy crowd, Maria.
That is exactly true, Tom. This place just turned in an uproar when it went up on the screen about Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And I am standing here with one of Bill Clinton's closest friends and one of his closest unofficial advisors, Vernon Jordan. You were just watching the returns with the president. What's the mood in his suite right now?
The mood, I'm sure, has... the volume has gone up since I was there. It was reasonably confident, anticipatory, optimistic. And now I'm sure it's brimming with victory and with smiles and with happiness and a feeling of being rewarded for very hard work and 4 years of good service.
You were with him 4 years ago. What's the single biggest difference in the suite tonight compared to 4 years ago?
Well, remember, it was very close. It was tense and edgy. This time it was not so tense, it was not so close, and not so edgy.
You talk to him a lot privately, and I know you take great pride not talking about those conversations very much, but was he very confident going into these final days and weeks of the campaign?
I think he was confident but not cocky, knowing that from hard work and campaigning, and he did it until the very end, that if he did that and persevered, that he would do what you've just witnessed, win.
We've all now turning our attention to his second terms, and historically second terms are often more difficult than the first. You and I were talking before we went on television about Nixon and Reagan. Why don't you think that's going to happen with Clinton? There's a lot of talk about scandals, ethical violations, and character. Do you think he'll have a tough time running the country?
I do not think he'll have a tough time running the country, and I think that the American people have given him the confidence that he needs and have expressed their own confidence in his leadership for these 4 years, and I think he's going to have a very good second term.
Will you play an official role in that second term?
I'll be around.
Official role?
I'll be around.
Okay. It's a nice night, so I'll let it go at that. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Maria Shriver. The chances that Vernon Jordan will give up that high-powered life that he has in Washington and a lot of corporate boards to give up all of that to become a part of the official family, chances are pretty slim and none, I think. He likes to be the first friend of Bill Clinton, and it's a role that he does very well. Let's go to Russell, Kansas now. A different mood there, obviously. This is the VFW in Bob Dole's hometown of Russell, Kansas, up there in the high plains. The sad thing is there always has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. But the great thing about American politics is the equanimity with which we have these presidential elections that are so bitterly fought, how people in the end are graceful. In fact, they show enormous dignity as we have a transition of power, or in this case, a continuation of power. Bob Dole went from that small town. He's paid tribute to it so many times. When he came back, gravely wounded from World War II, they set up a cigar box in the main street of Russell, Kansas, and collected quarters and dimes and nickels to help pay for his recovery from those grave injuries, and he's gone back many times to pay tribute to them. Let's go now to NBC's David Bloom, who's at Dole headquarters, with a man who was at Bob Dole's side at the very end, another wounded veteran, this time of the Vietnam War, Senator John McCain. David?
Well, Tom, you're certainly right. One of Bob Dole's closest friends in the Senate. He traveled with us through this last 96 hours of the campaign. You've been up with Bob Dole. Tell me what the mood is right now.
His mood has been upbeat. His mood has been steady. It's been cheerful. He's been doing all the work while the rest of us strap hangers are watching a great performance. And whether he wins or loses tonight, it's a heroic way to go out, which is the way he began his career, and I'm very proud of him.
But Senator, you know, on the plane flight back, the exit poll results were coming in. Bob Dole, if nothing else, he's a realist. He knew at a certain point that this was not going to happen tonight. How does he cope with that?
The way he always has adversity, with a steady, optimistic outlook. Look, if this guy wasn't an optimist, he'd have never gotten off that bed in a VA hospital. And he never has betrayed pessimism throughout it, but he is also a realist. But he really goes out of this knowing that he did the very best that he can, and I believe that he did the very best that he could. There's going to be a lot of second guessing and, you know, the kinds of things that happen after an election is over, but I'm proud of the job he did. I still think the West can come in strong for him, and I'm very interested, by the way, that this is only about a 4% difference in the popular vote. ABC poll had a 16% difference, as you know. So this is popular-wise, it's very respectable even so far.
But when you sit down with your close friend Bob Dole and try to explain how this happened, how this turned apparently into such a landslide, how do you do that? Well,
first of all, I ain't giving up until the polls close in Guam. But if this trend continues, look, I'm going to say, Bob, you fought the good fight. There's a good economy. Best politician probably has ever held the White House is there. And you did the right thing, and God bless you, and thank you. Thank you for serving our country so well. And I think that's what most Republicans are going to say.
Senator John McCain of Arizona, thank you so much. Tom, back to you.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Thank you, David Bloom. Well, let's go now to NBC's Brian Williams, who's been the White House correspondent for much of the past 2 years. 2 years ago at this time, when we were trying, not exactly this night, obviously, but it was election night in November, when George Stephanopoulos and James Carville and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were looking at those Republican election returns. They were at the lowest point. They've even talked about this in their political lives.
That's right, and we remember the sight of the puffy-faced president having been up most of the night, seeing the press first thing in the morning, saying that he would recover from this, and he set about to recover from this and did. And now what I think we can expect in a second Clinton term, Tom, this is going to be a president playing for legacy. He is already saying at age 50 in speeches, ladies and gentlemen, I've reached that point in my life where I've realized I have more yesterdays than tomorrows. This is a man who's going to be speaking in quotes, but thinking about how the inscriptions will look when people sum up his presidency. And that, I think, is why there will be so much anger within the White House at what are destined to be continuing investigations into the various scandals, or what the GOP hopes will turn into scandals concerning this administration.
All right, thanks very much, Brian Williams. We want to take you now to the Senate races around the country. A lot of them still hotly contested, but we have a winner tonight in the state of Virginia, John Warner, a Republican returning. He had a very tough race from Mark Warner, a young entrepreneur with a lot of money. I think he spent about $8 million of his own money. In the state of Wyoming, Alan Simpson retired. Michael Enzi, a Republican, will take his seat, so the Republicans hang on to that one, much to their relief. That was another hotly contested race. Jack Reed, the Democrat in Rhode Island, Claiborne Pell is retiring, so that stays in the Democratic column. Our projected winner in New Mexico, no surprise here, Pete Domenici, who's a very powerful member of the Senate Budget Committee. He goes back. In Minnesota, the most liberal man in the United States Senate is Paul Wellstone. A lot of Republicans thought it was a mistake when he won 6 years ago. He had a rematch against Rudy Boschwitz. Rudy Boschwitz ran some very negative ads, and the Minnesota voters rejected those ads. Paul Wellstone hangs on to a seat. So, as it stands at this hour, no change. We have 43 Democrats who have been elected, 46 Republicans who will be in the chamber. We have an evening that is still long in terms of the Senate race. There was a 6-vote margin for the Republicans going into tonight. It'll be well before the evening, well into the evening before we know finally what happens, not only in the Senate, but in the House as well. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night, is being sponsored in part by Ford Taurus, a look you've never seen from a name you know well. Have you driven a Ford lately? Here is Tom Brokaw.
And coming up on 9:15 now Eastern Time, we are projecting Bill Clinton, of course, reelected to a second term to the White House as President of the United States. I want to remind everyone, however, in the Rocky Mountain West, and especially in the Pacific time zone, you still have time to vote. There are a lot of important contested races out there. We do want to show you in the Midwest right now what's going on in the state of North Dakota. The Republican there is the Governor Ed Schaefer. We projected Ed Schaefer reelected to a second term in North Dakota. As you might expect, it's pandemonium in Little Rock, Arkansas, and NBC's Maria Shriver is there now. She's with George Stephanopoulos, who is a political advisor to the president. There's been some question about whether he'll stick around for a second term, Maria.
Should I ask him that right off the top, Tom?
Why not?
Okay, Tom Brokaw wants to know, you're going to stick around for your the second term?
I'm going to the beach this weekend, then I'll think about it after that. No, tonight what we're thinking about is the president's terrific victory tonight. He's really grateful for this chance to be the first Democrat since Franklin Roosevelt to serve another 4 terms, and we'll think about the future later.
But you have certainly expressed a desire to move on in the second administration.
Well, we'll see. I've had the greatest privilege in the world, the chance to work for President Clinton through 2 presidential campaigns and 4 years in the White House. That's more than anyone can ask for, so I'm going to think about it over the next few weeks.
Was this ending really written a year ago when the government shut down?
I think that had an awful lot to do with it. When the American people saw President Clinton stand up to the Republican attempts to take too much out of Medicare and education and environment, I think they saw that he was the right leader for our time, and I think a lot of the table was set in late 1995.
Was this also a case of you ran a perfect campaign and Bob Dole ran a bad one, or was it timing?
Well, I think it's because the president kept his commitments and the country is doing well. The economy is doing very, very well. The president started to keep his commitments on crime and education, and the people recognized that. And they also knew that every single day he'd get up and go to work and think about them, and the American people really learned that they could count on him to fight for them.
Personally, on a personal note, what's the single biggest difference tonight compared to 4 years ago for you?
Well, it's about 20 degrees warmer, first of all. But it's they're both gratifying in their own ways. You know, to run as a challenger and come out of nowhere for a win is obviously very, very exciting. But now we have a record, and having the chance to defend that record and keep fighting is great.
Okay, George Stephanopoulos, we'll hear more about your future later. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Maria Shriver. Thank you, George Stephanopoulos. Another young man on the opposite side of the political spectrum joins us now. He's Ralph Reed, who, of course, is the man behind the Christian Coalition. 2 years ago, when you and I talked, Mr. Reed, I think that you expected that this presidential election would turn out a lot different than it is tonight.
Well, I don't know. Really, Tom, I think the best break that Bill Clinton could have had in 1994 was to have the Republicans gain control of Congress. It gave him a wake-up call. He moved to the center, and it made it possible for him to run to the right on issues like V-chip, on issues like welfare reform. He signed the Defense of Marriage Act. So I don't think tonight, if Bill Clinton wins, and certainly that's what's happening tonight, that it's a referendum for liberalism.
But we are seeing, for example, that Catholics are voting for Bill Clinton in overwhelming numbers. One of the real hot-button issues in this election has been abortion. And I think that you probably expected that the Catholics would go to Bob Dole on that issue alone.
Well, I would also point out, by the way, that according to a survey that we did, Tom, with the Wirthlin Research Company, what we found was that about 24% of voters said that Clinton's stand on abortion was a factor in them voting against him. Only 19% said that about Bob Dole. So the pro-life issue was a 5% differential winning issue for the Republicans.
We're also showing an enormous gender gap tonight, Mr. Reed, and it's been harmful to Republican candidates, not just at the presidential level, but based on the exit polling that we're seeing right across the board. And a lot of women in this country think that the Christian Coalition and other socially active groups on the right end of the spectrum, on the right side of the spectrum, make it too tough for them.
I don't think there's a scintilla of data that can support that from the exit polls. Again, as I said, on the abortion issue, it's a net gain for the Republicans. And by the way, Tom, 20% of the voters in an exit poll we've conducted tonight said that moral and family issues were the major factor in how they voted the way they did, and they voted 3-1 for Bob Dole. In addition to that, in Georgia, which I think Bob Dole is going to ultimately end up winning, among self-identified born-again evangelicals, 79% voted for Bob Dole, only 11% for Bill Clinton. The fact is that without this core of committed evangelical Christians, this would have turned into a meltdown all the way down the ticket. Bob Dole's going to lose tonight, but the Republicans are going to hang on to both the House and the Senate, and they can thank the evangelical vote for the fact that it's going to turn out that way.
Mr. Reed, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, we'll be talking to you again, I know, in the future. Well, we still have to resolve, of course, what's going to happen in the House and the Senate. Those are the races we'll be keeping track of throughout the evening here on NBC. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this. We're now able to project that Bill Clinton is the winner in Louisiana. That only adds to his electoral vote total, which some time ago now, or in the course of this hour, exceeded 270 electoral votes. So we color the state of Louisiana tonight blue for Bill Clinton. That's an important state for him to hang on to. It does appear, if this pattern holds, that it will be a landslide electoral victory for Bill Clinton. At least we're still waiting to see what happens with the popular vote. That will be important to him. He wants to get to 50% or more so that he can deal with Republican Congress if, in fact, the Republicans retain control of the House and the Senate. Jonathan Alter is a contributor to NBC. He's a popular columnist for Newsweek magazine, of course. This is the first Democrat to win re-election to a four-year term since Franklin Roosevelt. But it seems to me that this time that Bill Clinton is out there doing it more on his own than he is as a man of the party. So it's going to be an interesting 4 years, Jonathan.
I think that's right. He's clearly on his own, in the same way that Richard Nixon was in his big landslide in 1972. They actually lost 2 Senate seats that year. Ronald Reagan lost a couple of Senate seats in '84. But you know, Tom, when you look at this in historical perspective, Bill Clinton thought, I think when he went into politics, that his idol, John F. Kennedy's description of this century, a long twilight struggle with communism, that would be the big theme. Thanks to Bob Dole's generation, instead, we're ending with a kind of talk show presidency.
All right. Thanks very much. Jonathan Alter will be seeing you during the course of this evening. Bill Clinton, of course, talking about a bridge to the 21st century. Now he gets to walk across it. We'll be back with more.
Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Live at 10:30 Eastern Time, you're looking at the Channel Gardens and Rockefeller Plaza. We've rearranged the furniture and the lighting there just a bit tonight, but this election is going on all the way from Rockefeller Plaza, now across the country to the far reaches of Washington and Oregon, and there in Little Rock, Arkansas. Thousands of people have assembled to hear a native son, Bill Clinton, who has now been elected twice President of the United States, come and greet them and talk about what this moment means for him. At the remarkably young age of 50, Bill Clinton has been elected to his second term. It gives me only small personal pain to say to you that he'll be out of office and having completed 2 terms as President of the United States by the time he's 54, 2 years younger than I am right now. That tells you exactly how young he is. We now have him with 40% of the precincts counted so far. At 50% of the vote, he wants very much to go over 51%. It's not just a matter of personal pride. It's a matter of political strategy as well. There are some very difficult states around the country. In Georgia, more than half of the precincts have been counted so far, just 2 points between them. Bob Dole, the Republican on top, that tiny R is Republican, but if you keep track of the colors, red Republican, blue for the Democrats, even though the D and the R's are a little small. Bill Clinton won Georgia 4 years ago. He'd like to win it again this time. In Mississippi, we're coming up on 2/3 of the precincts counted so far. Again, just a point separating these two men. Ross Perot not breaking through to double digits as he moves into the West, where he hopes he'll do better there. In Colorado, Ross Perot down to 4% of the vote. Only 5% of the precincts have been counted in that Rocky Mountain state. Bill Clinton wants very much to win Colorado. South Dakota, Bill Clinton in a dead heat with Bob Dole, a popular figure up there. They see him as a fellow plainsman, Bob Dole, but at the same time, Clinton made a final stop in Sioux Falls just last night, and he hopes to do well there in South Dakota. He would be the first Democrat since Lyndon Johnson, 1964, I think.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And he could help elect a Democratic senator in South Dakota, Tim Johnson, over Larry Pressler, Tom.
Yep.
You know, Bob Dole has won 12 states thus far, Tom. George Bush won 18. You know, deep down in Bob Dole's mind, he's thinking, well, I'd like to...
Very much to get over that top.
Absolutely right.
But it's getting tough for him now because he's got Alaska left. And then, you know, Washington's going to be tough for him probably. Oregon's going to be tough. California's going to be very tough. There are not many states left out there, with the exception of these that we've been showing that are too close to call, that he could still pick up. So he needs to pick up those 6.
And with those slim margins in those states that should be going Republican, we have to keep looking back at the House of Representatives and wonder how they're faring. We should know that shortly.
Okay. Let's go to Lisa Myers, Tim, our colleague who's down in Washington. She's been talking to a lot of folks behind the scenes about what's going on with the House of Representatives tonight. Well, this is what makes politics the great game that it is, Lisa. The battle for control of the House of Representatives. It was just 2 years ago that the Republicans swept in with their Contract for America, talking about a revolution that will last into the 21st century. Tonight, they're hoping to hang on.
Well, right now we have 4 of those Republican freshmen who were swept in 2 years ago who have been swept out. 3 of them were expected, Heineman and Funderburk in North Carolina and Flanagan in Illinois, who took the Rostenkowski seat 2 years ago. The seat the Republicans had not expected to lose is Martini in New Jersey. Now, that is 4 Republicans who have lost among the freshmen. The big surprise, though, is a 3-term Republican in Connecticut, Gary Franks, one of 2 black Republicans in the House. He has been a big target of Democrats for a lot of years. He was on organized labor's hit list. He invited Newt Gingrich into his district during the campaign, and in the end may have been done in by a book deal, which Democrats managed to link to the book deal, the Speaker's controversial book deal a couple of years ago. Anyway, the Republicans have lost 5 seats at this point. On the other hand, they have picked up an open Democratic seat in Mississippi. So right now what we're beginning to see is a trend in the direction of the Democrats. We don't know if it'll hold. We don't know if it will be enough, but certainly Democrats are picking up some seats so far this evening.
All right, thanks very much, Lisa Myers. One of those prominent young Democrats in Chicago tonight is Jesse Jackson Jr. So we saw a good deal of him this summer at the Democratic National Convention. He was even giving his father some instructions on the art of compromise when last we talked. You're going to have to hone those skills even more if you have what appears to be a very close margin in the House, Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Brokaw, I think there's probably no question at all that unless we regain control of the Congress, we will not be in a position to pass the kinds of legislation that are necessary to make a difference for people across our country. I'm sorry my IFB has just made a terrible sound, but we need the 218 votes.
You need the 218 votes, but how is it now? Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, the wonderful thing about the Jacksons I've always found is that whatever my question is, they're going to tell me pretty much what's on their mind anyhow, so whether you hear me or not, I'm sure that that's what you're going to do.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brokaw, go ahead.
Now, what happens if, in fact, you don't get there? Do you just play the part of a minority party for the next 2 years? Are you not going to be able to initiate anything, you think?
Well, I think the president's proposals to build a bridge to the 21st century are certainly going to confront certain obstructions, including toll booths and potholes on that road, which includes Medicare and many of the programs that Newt Gingrich and the Republican-led Congress tried to go after in the 104th Congress. If, in fact, we get the 218 votes that we need, Dick Gephardt will be the Speaker, and we can help the president bring about the kind of change that he wants to see in the 21st century.
But short of that, are you going to be able to make any changes, for example, in welfare reform, which was an issue that you feel so passionately about?
Well, I think that it's going to require a certain amount of initiative. When you look at the 98 Democrats who voted against that bill, Dick Gephardt, David Bonnier, Charlie Rangel, others, they will be in leadership in the 104th Congress. I'm not of the opinion that Newt Gingrich or the particularly Republican-led Congress has an interest in fixing that bill, and the only way we're going to be able to make that difference is to regain control of the House.
All right, Jesse Jackson Jr., thank you very much. You'll be going back to the House of Representatives. We do expect to see a good deal more of you, not just in the next 2 years, but in the years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Brokaw.
Thanks for being with us tonight. By the way, in recent national polls, this country has indicated pretty clearly that it is right of center. Only about 16% of the voters say that they're liberals. 44% say that they're moderate. 34% say that they're conservative. 6% say they don't know. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
We're back as we look at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, the ice skating rink, which we've converted into an outdoor television studio tonight, and I'm on wheels, about to slide off my own set here for just a moment. And some Republicans have been sliding off their sets as well tonight, and it's getting to be a very tight race for the House of Representatives, Tim.
Tom, Republican sources are telling us privately they are going to lose seats in the House. We don't know yet how many. The Democrats need a net gain of 19 to take control. And it's interesting what's happening. In the states where Bill Clinton's winning big, we're looking for those coattails. We saw them on the Senate side in Massachusetts, New Jersey. We'll see if they translate to the House side. The House has changed, Tom. The Republican used to be a Midwest party. Dirksen of Illinois, Ford of Michigan, Michael of Illinois. Now who are the leaders of the Republican Party? Gingrich of Georgia, Army of Texas, DeLay of Texas. And if the Republicans in the Midwest opt to vote Democratic, moderate Republicans voting for the Democrats, it could be a long night indeed for the Republicans who now control the House.
Yeah, there are all kinds of new titles for you to keep track of. We used to talk about yellow dog Democrats. Those are Democrats in the South primarily who would vote for a yellow dog if it were a Democrat. Now they have blue dog Democrats. These are centrist Democrats from the South who are more inclined to go the other way across the line. It comes from a blue dog that's become the famous work of George Rodrigue, a Cajun artist that we know something about, and it's now become almost a caricature around the country.
But pick up on that point. If suddenly the Republicans keep control of the House, but by only 3 or 4 members, what happens then? Do people switch over? Do the Republicans stay united behind Newt Gingrich? Or does Dick Armey or John Kasich of Ohio and others say, hey, listen, this thing's too flexible and too vulnerable. Why don't we make a change here? This could be a long and interesting night and year.
Okay, we want to go to Massachusetts now, where they had one of the most spirited races for the United States Senate in the country. Everyone thought it's a shame that one of them will have to lose. Well, the one who lost still has a job. That's Governor William Weld. He'll be going back to the State House, and just a few moments ago, he made this concession speech to John Kerry in Massachusetts.
Senator Kerry deserves a great deal of political and personal credit. He ran a very strong race from beginning to end. He stuck to his positions, as did I, and he has prevailed in a fair and equal fight, if ever there was one.
That's Bill Weld. He and John Kerry both came up through private schools, went to the best universities. They have distinguished themselves as public servants, and we'll be hearing a lot more from both of them in the years to come. John Kerry gets to go back to Washington, Bill Weld back to the governor's office in Massachusetts, but he has national aspirations, or if he doesn't, a lot of people have them for him. Gwen Ifill, any thoughts at this hour about what's going on in Washington, D.C., where you're now? Now are?
Well, Tom, as you know, the AFL-CIO, the labor union, spent $35 million in this race, and they said early on what they were going to do was make sure that the Democrats retook the House and the Senate. Obviously, they're not doing so well with the Senate, and then a couple of key races in the House, you can look and see that they're having a mixed bag there. In Pennsylvania, English, in the Pittsburgh, in the Erie area, he is winning his seat. They had targeted him. He's a Republican. Longley in Maine, who is a Democrat, who they had targeted, another Republican who they had targeted, he is losing. So they won that. They won one, they lost one. Steve Chabot in Ohio is another Republican. He's winning. So the AFL-CIO targeted a lot of folks, and they didn't necessarily win. And another trend, of course, is race politics in this country. We see that in the Torricelli-Zimmer race in New Jersey, Bob Torricelli, the Democrat, got 90% of the black vote, and he split the white vote with Dick Zimmer, who lost, the Republican. And in North Carolina, once again, Harvey Gantt got 90% of the black vote, but got very little of the white vote. And in Cynthia McKinney's district in Georgia, which was redistricted because for racial gerrymandering reasons, she's losing so far, big time. So there's lots of questions about all the traditional ways of voting and getting votes in this.
Do you think that the AFL-CIO money turned out to be a double-edged sword of some kind, because it financed a lot of attack ads, and that caused a lot of folks to say, hey, listen, I don't like all that outside money coming in here?
Oh, yeah, and there was a lot of backlash. One thing that AFL-CIO started doing was spending their money in May and letting everyone know that's what they were doing. The National Rifle Association and big business groups and the Republicans decided to strike back late. They spent their money targeted, they spent it late, and they spent it when people were paying attention.
All right, Gwen Ifill, someone you know a lot about, is about to make an appearance in Texas. There he is, Ross Perot.
And you did it, so congratulations. I want to thank the millions of people across this country that did it. Nobody does it better. In California, it takes 2 years to create a party. They did it in just 18 days, and that shocked the system. And believe me, the system needs some shocks. I want to thank the staff that's worked tirelessly on this for doing an incredible job. And I particularly would like to thank Pat and Kay Choate, who are right here with us tonight. Pat has done a fantastic job. We had an incredibly talented team that put all those television shows together. They haven't slept. If they're here tonight, and I know they're here, they're probably standing up asleep tonight, making up for lost time, because they've been going night and day. Thank you, Tom and Mike and Bill, and thank the great crew from AMS. You are terrific. We're going to keep the pressure on the major issues. I think they've gotten the word on campaign finance reform, don't you? They've repented and been reborn. My dream is they will go to heaven because they do what they say they'll do, right? Then it's done. It's done. But that's got to stop. We have got to get that done, and we have got to get campaign reform in terms of the time for campaign and all that done. We must set the highest ethical and moral standards for the people who serve in our government, and all of that has got to be changed from rules to laws in the next 4 years, and we're going to have to stand at the gate and keep the pressure on, and we will. Now, we will not let our children and grandchildren pay an 82% tax rate, which our government forecasts they will. We've got to have the balanced budget amendment. We've got to have the plan to balance the budget and all the things that you have fought so hard and so long for, and we've got to stand at the gate to make sure that happens if we want to pass on a better, stronger country to our children. We will make the 21st century the best in our country's history, but you and I have to stay on watch. We have to keep the pressure on, and as I've said 1,000 times to both parties when they say, what does it take to make all of you people go away? And that is, do all of this, and then we don't have anything to talk about, right? It's done. Thank you. You've worked night and day. You've done a tremendous job. Take a little break, and then we'll climb back in the ring and keep the pressure on to see that everybody keeps those promises, right? Great. And now,
Ross Perot tonight talking to his supporters in Texas. Ross Perot, who was in and out of the race 4 years ago and then finished very strong with almost 20% of the vote, this time ran against Richard Lamb for the Reform Party nomination. Many people felt that it was wired from the outset for Ross Perot. It's effectively been his party. He's bankrolled it. He started it, and he got the nomination, and he is finishing what appears to be in single digits tonight, Tim.
Tom, Ross Perot is now 66. In the year 2000, he'll be 70. He has to decide whether he is going to be the right messenger for the third-party movement in this country.
Well, let's talk about the third party period. What do you think the chances are that a third party will be mounted in 4 years from now without someone like Ross Perot? And do you think the chances are that the two mainstream parties will have gotten the message in the last year or so?
It depends how partisan Washington is. If we have a situation where the Republicans control the House and the Senate, and there's a Democratic president, and it's gridlock, then, Tom, think about the people who are leaving the Senate. Dole, Kassebaum, Simpson, Nunn, Bradley, Cohen, by and large being replaced by people who are much more ideological, much more partisan. If we have a hotly contested, divisive contest to see who can outpunch each other in Washington, I think the opportunity for a third party is great in the year 2000.
All right, thanks very much, Tim Russert. There are 13 people who have retired from the United States Senate this term alone. That is a record number, and the new DNA of the Senate will be very important to determine what happens in the year 2000. By the way, a lot of you have called in to say, listen, this is not the last election of the 20th century. The last election will be in the year 2000. Well, for my purposes at least, it's the last election because it's the last presidency of the 20th century. The next presidency will be in the new century. So can we just settle on that, all of us? It'll make it a lot easier for us. Okay, Mississippi, Dole. He's the projected winner in the state of Mississippi with 7 electoral votes. He had counted on winning that state, but of course it's not enough for him. But we color the state of Mississippi red for Bob Dole. That's the home state of Trent Lott and Thad Cochran. It's been a pretty Republican state for some time now, and Bob Dole is the winner there. Bill Clinton has 291 electoral votes, Bob Dole 126. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this. The stage is set with anticipation in Little Rock, Arkansas. William Jefferson Clinton, a native son of the state of Arkansas who served as governor and attorney general there, went from Hope, Arkansas to Yale, then on to Oxford, and then returned to run for office. Now has been elected president of the United States for a second time. We do expect to see him tonight. We want to remind you, polls close in California in 8 minutes, and we'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. From our election headquarters in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again. We've got a couple of Senate races to talk about right now. In the state of Maine, Susan Collins, who worked for Bill Cohen, the retiring Republican senator. Susan Collins is our projected winner. That means the Republicans hold on to that New England Senate seat in Maine. In New Hampshire, we have an interesting situation developing. Earlier, we projected that Dick Swett, the Democratic challenger, would be elected to the United States Senate. We're now saying that race is too close to call. 3/4 of the precincts have been counted so far. As you can see, 2 points separating them in. So this is the Senate chamber as it's reflected right now. If it stays as is, the Republicans will pick up 3 seats tonight. We are showing 50 Republicans elected, 44 Democrats. But there are some outstanding races still around the country, still close to call. So we'll see what happens. That if, in fact, Bob Smith gets reelected in New Hampshire, that's a big plus for the Republicans.
It sure is, Tom. You know, it's interesting. In the state of Maine, Bill Clinton won that state by 23 points, and the Republicans still carried the Senate. Ticket splitting. Huge, Tom. A little bit of history, Tom. Maine now has 2 women senators, both Republican.
That's true.
And California has 2 women senators. 2 states with
Maine to California.
Not bad.
We want to show you now these states that are too close to call around the country. For example, for president in Georgia, Bill Clinton won that 4 years ago. That would be a sweet victory for Bob Dole if he were able to defeat him there, especially with a Democratic governor in that state. Almost 3/4 of the precincts have been counted, 2 points between the 2 men. In Colorado, more than 1/3 of the precincts have been tallied so far. Bill Clinton with a narrow lead over Bob Dole. In South Dakota, they're now approaching 2/3 of the precincts counted so far. We are projecting that Bob Dole, the winner there, but as you can see, a very tight race in that Great Plains state, the great state of South Dakota. Tim Russert, before this evening is out, it appears that Bill Clinton is going to have a lot of states behind him, a lot of electoral votes, but we have been talking all night long about the importance to him of the popular vote, about whether or not he can go over the 50% threshold.
He wants to go to, if it is a Republican House, Republican Senate, and say, folks, listen, can't we just have a peace pipe here? I got half the country to vote for me. I have a majority of the folks. He keeps looking at that 50% number. I've been talking to people all day long, Tom, who keep saying the president is fixated on that 50%.
Well, you know, he was described by a lot of his critics as not a fully franchised president because he got only 43% of the last time. They failed to point out, a lot of them, obviously, that Jack Kennedy finished with less than 50% in his first term. So did Richard Nixon, finished with less than 50% in his first term. Who else? Jimmy Carter, I think, was under 50% as well.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter actually had 50.7.
Yeah.
But Woodrow Wilson, who won 2 terms as a Democrat, both below 50%.
Right.
Clinton wants that 50 number. It's just something he has in his head. Bob Dole had 15 as his magic number. Bill Clinton's is 50.
Well, the interesting state that we're still counting tonight at this hour, the combination plate of American politics, is the state of California. It is the largest single state in the country. It has 54 electoral votes. 30 million people live out there. And Bill Clinton has spent a lot of time in California. So has Bob Dole. But Bill Clinton was blowing out Bob Dole in the polls, so he could pick up some raw numbers in that big state of California, especially in the southern part where the bulk of the population lives.
And the more you listen to Bob Dole and other Republicans tonight, Tom, the more you understand what was being reported in the papers and on television 2 weeks ago is that Bob Dole decided on a save the Congress strategy.
Right.
Let me go to California, spend a lot of time and money in congressional districts out there, Washington State, Oregon. The Republican Party basically conceded the presidency 3 weeks ago and began the focus on Congress. It worked in the Senate. We're still waiting to see if it works for the House.
The question that I have is how much in the next term Bill Clinton will turn to a specific domestic agenda that he'll outline to the country and say, these are the things that I want to achieve in Medicare, in education, in some health care reform, nothing like he attempted 4 years ago, and in the environment. And how much he'll decide that he wants to be the president above the fray, that he'll want to become a foreign policy president more because that's where you kind of win your place in history, how much he'll want to travel across the country, how much he'll want to get down to the nitty-gritty of doing the business in Washington, and how much he'll want to play the ceremonial part.
He has no choice. Unless he fixes Medicare, he will not have any money to do anything else. And, Tom, Al Gore is going to say to him tomorrow, hey, Bill, fix Medicare now.
Right.
Don't let it go broke in the year 2000.
Yeah, don't leave it for me. Well, and a lot of what will happen in the next 4 years, because they do have a close relationship, is that Bill Clinton will be helping Al Gore set the table, if you will, for 2000. We want to show you Little Rock, Arkansas, and tell the stations around the country that are affiliated with NBC that we've just heard from Jesse Norman, and we think that momentarily President Clinton will be appearing. They don't put that seal of the presidency on the podium until he's just about ready to emerge, and that's about what's going to happen here in Little Rock, Arkansas. What a night it is for the Bill Clinton family. However you feel about his politics or about his personal conduct, this is a remarkable comeback for a politician who 2 years ago was wandering around the halls of the White House after the presidential or after the congressional off-year election, wondering what would become of him, what in fact had happened to him in that election.
Telling the press, I am relevant.
Right.
Having to make that point, Tom.
He was almost incoherent in that press conference that he had immediately after the 1994 election, wandering around in a rhetorical sense, trying to find a reason why the country had so completely rejected everything that he felt that he stood for and that he had done in his first 2 years in office.
He told, I think he's coming.
Reagan, Richard Nixon, now Bill Clinton, re-elected President of the United States. Not Lyndon Johnson, John Kennedy, of course. His life was taken tragically before he had the opportunity to run again. Harry Truman chose not to run. Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, was re-elected. This is a real political partnership, ladies and gentlemen. That's not going to come of any news to any of you. These two very bright, very ambitious people have wanted this for a long, long time. They've made a lot of personal sacrifices along the way, but they've carved out their place as well in history. And tonight, for another 4 years, they'll occupy 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Maria Shriver, what is it like there? Well, I thought we had Maria there, but perhaps not. Here's Vice President Al Gore and his family. Go ahead, Maria.
Oh, Tom, yeah, this is obviously, as you can see, the moment everybody here has been waiting for. They have been serenaded all night by the likes of Jesse Norman, Tony Bennett, but they have been waiting for Bill Clinton, his family, and Vice President Gore, and they're very anxious to hear what he has to say. You can feel the tension here, the excitement. The night is very young here in Little Rock.
These two men who 4 years ago came to Washington, D.C. untested, untried in national office have learned so much, we hope, in the last 4 years. It's been a rocky time for them, but they have gotten along well. They have many shared political values. They have confidence in each other. They have confidence in each other's judgments. The Vice President, Al Gore, is not just a figurehead. He's an important advisor to the president. And he, in many ways, is one of the cornerstones of this administration. He helps set policy, design it. Tim Russert.
Jack Kemp said during the campaign, my role model as vice president is Al Gore.
Right.
By the way, Tom, it's not too early to think about the year 2000. We asked in our exit poll, who would you vote for, Al Gore or Jack Kemp? 43 Gore, 39 Kemp. Close race.
Close race already. Four years ago, they were saying, don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. Before I present the president, I would like to thank the people who made this glorious evening possible. My wife, Tipper, who has campaigned from one end of the country and back again with flair and passion. My four children, Corinna, Kristen, Sarah, and Albert, who have filled our lives with love and our hearts with pride. I would like to thank my parents who have set a standard of excellence and integrity in public service that has always inspired me. My brother-in-law, Frank Hunger, a wise and trusted friend. On behalf of the president and myself, I'd like to thank Peter Knight, the best campaign manager ever, and a campaign staff that worked harder and more effectively than any in history. And on a personal note, I would like to thank the people of my home state of Tennessee for giving us a victory this evening. And may I say, on behalf of Tipper and myself, to a very dear friend, and on behalf of millions of families in villages throughout our land, a very special thank you to a woman who has faced extraordinary pressures with grace, dignity, and an unbreakable commitment to serving our nation, America's First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton. A few blocks from here, in the summer of 1992, then Governor Bill Clinton asked me to be his running mate. It has been my great privilege to work by his side these past 4 years, and I want you to know I have gotten to know him as very few others have. I have seen him lift and carry burdens of unimaginable weight, day after day after day. I've heard him ask over and over again, what is right for the American people? I've seen him stand hour upon hour, comforting American families who have lost loved ones in natural disasters, wretched acts of terror, and in service to our country. I've seen him go on working for the American people from before dawn to well after midnight, however difficult the challenge, however towering the obstacles, however long the odds. That takes strength. That takes vision. That takes leadership. That takes character. The Bible says, by their fruits ye shall know them. On this night 4 years ago, on this very spot, I said we felt good having won an election, but even better at having been granted the chance to change a country. Much has changed since we last gathered here, and it has changed because of the resolve and determination of the American people under Bill Clinton's leadership. Under President Bill Clinton, we have forged a new prosperity, putting our financial house in order while restarting the great American jobs machine. We have deepened our ethic of environmental stewardship and redoubled our commitment to protecting God's creation. We have secured our place in the world by helping to bring peace and reconciliation to lands scarred by hatred's savage hand, and by speeding the spread of democracy and free markets across the globe. We have moved to redeem the promise of representative democracy by reinventing the processes of self-government to make them work better and cost less. And we have begun the task of restoring faith and responsibility to the American community by keeping our streets safe and our values secure. Under Bill Clinton, the United States of America is not just better off, it's better. Now, 4 years later, we again celebrate a victory. But what we savor much more is the opportunity you have given us once again to lift our country higher still. And from where we stand tonight, we can now see the shimmering rays of light that signal the dawn of the 21st century. We see an America that is preparing and empowering all of its people and giving them opportunities to succeed. We see an America in which success does not depend on how others categorize you, but upon what is in your heart. An America in which talented teachers shepherd dedicated students through the best schools in the entire world, where an 8-year-old can pick up a book and read it on his or her own. An America in which higher education is open to all and affordable by all. From our vantage point tonight, we see an America where every child can connect to the information superhighway and absorb the vast knowledge of a small planet. An America where any person with a good idea and the desire to work can enter the new networked economy and become tomorrow's successful entrepreneur. An America where the greatest scientists in the world continue to make discoveries that change our lives for the better. We see an America where the water is safe and the air is clean, whose national parks continue to thrive and delight our families, whose toxic waste sites are cleaned up, and whose urban brownfields become alive again and green with promise for all our people. From where we stand tonight, we see an America making a transition to a new era, aware of the uncertainties but inspired by the possibilities. We are beginning to see in America scrubbing the stain of cynicism from our national fabric, reinvigorating the civic institutions on which our national health depends. An America motivated not by what divides us, but by what makes us one. And that is why we also see in America where a president of one party and a Congress of another can work together to serve citizens of every party. Let me say a special word to America's young people tonight. This is your nation, too. Your claim on it is just as great as those who are older. Please involve yourselves in our democratic process. Add your voices and your talents to our grand experiment in self-government. Ladies and gentlemen, in only a few hours, it will be morning, and across America, from the Shenandoah Valley to Silicon Valley, from Brighton Beach in New York to Oak Street Beach in Chicago, from Tampa Bay to Puget Sound, from the Oval Office in the White House to the kitchen table in your house, the sun will rise on another day in America, another step forward on our national journey. And leading us in that journey will be the man from hope who tonight becomes a man for history. To this election, in the entire history of our nation, from the presidency of George Washington forward, only 13 people have been elected to 2 straight terms as President of the United States of America. 6 of them have been Democrats. One of history's short list.
Well, Al Gore is talking. We want to tell you that we have our first firm indication of what's going to happen now with the House of Representatives. It does appear that the Republicans will retain control of that chamber, but their margin will be reduced. We can't say exactly by how much now, but it looks like they could lose as many as 13 seats. They'll get down to 223. And there's a plus or minus in that, obviously, but it looks like the Republicans will keep the House of Representatives. Their numbers could be reduced anywhere between 4 to 14. It's hard to say. They're still outstanding races in Washington and in the state of California. There's a heartfelt embrace. Two contemporaries, two men who share each other's political destinies now. One, the vice president with aspirations for the higher office. This man at the age of 50, entering his final term as president of the United States. We're told by Jim Miklashevsky that Mrs. Clinton took a staff van today, went for a joyride with some friends, and Jim says that the van and the driver, Mrs. Clinton, arrived safely back at the hotel.
Just 4 years from now, we will enter a new century of great challenge and unlimited possibility. Now, we've got a bridge to build, and I'm ready if you are. Today, the American people have spoken. They have affirmed our course. They have told us to go forward. America has told every one of us, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, loud and clear, it is time to put politics aside, join together, and get the job done for America's future. In the last 4 years, we've made remarkable progress. But in our schools, our families, our workplaces, and our communities, our journey is not done. My fellow Americans, we have work to do, and that's what this election was all about. I want to say to all of you here and to all of the American people, no words can convey the gratitude I feel tonight for the honor that has been given to me. It is an honor that belongs to many. First, to my family, to my wonderful wife of 21 years, who from the day I first met her began teaching me that it does take a village to raise our children and build our future. To our daughter Chelsea, for understanding the work we have done together, the burdens it has imposed. Today, I went down to the train station to vote in the last election in which I will appear on the ballot. And as I have done in every year since she was born, I took Chelsea to the ballot with me. And as we looked at the ballot together and discussed the issues there, I thank God that I was born an American. I thank the members of my wonderful family who are here, my stepfather Dick Kelly, my wonderful mother-in-law Dorothy Rodham, and all the others. And I thank my beloved mother who is smiling up there and said, I never had a doubt. I always knew it would be this way. I thank the friends of my lifetime. There are people who have stood with me through thick and thin, who started with me in grade school and junior and senior high school, in college and all across the years since. Friends who knew me and knew my dreams and stood as a powerful force against those who sought to stop America's progress with the politics of personal destruction. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for what you did for America. I thank the people of my beloved native state. I would not be anywhere else in the world tonight. In front of this wonderful old Capitol that has seen so much of my own life and our state's history, I thank you for staying with me so long, for never giving up, for always knowing that we could do better. I thank the finest vice president this country has ever seen. Because of Al Gore, we have a stronger and more secure relationship with the democratic Russia. We are exploring the wonders of new technologies for the benefit of America. We are protecting our environment, and we have reinvented America's government so that it does more with less, thanks to his leadership. It is a legacy unique in the history of this republic. I thank Tipper for her friendship, for her crusades on behalf of our children and the mental health of the American people, and for always standing with us along with her children and her family. I thank the members of our administration, the cabinet members, the members of the White House staff, I thank all those who are part of the permanent service to the President at the White House, and the medical staff. I thank especially my Secret Service detail that has been so challenged by a president determined not to be isolated from the American people. I thank the members of our campaign staff, all those who have served in this election and the work you have done. I thank the leaders of our party in the Congress and the state houses. I thank all those who stood for what we believe in these elections today, those who won and those who did not. You did a service to America by raising the things in which we believe, and I thank you all and wish you Godspeed. I want to thank the employees of the nation's government. They have had to do a remarkable job. We have reduced the size of our government to its smallest point since President Kennedy served, and yet they have continued to serve the people better year in and year out. They had to do it in the face of enormous challenges and outright hatred for momentary periods. They had to live with the horror of Oklahoma City and the difficulties that came along the way. But the people who serve us deserve our thanks, and I thank them. I thank those who served this administration and our cause who are no longer here tonight. And one especially I must thank, my friend and brother Ron Brown. You're looking down on us, and I know you're smiling too. On a purely personal note, I must thank my pastor, Rex Horn, who prayed with me before I came out here tonight, and all the ministers and people of God who prayed for me and with me over these last 4 years. There were a few especially, and they know who they are, who came to the White House time after time in good times and bad. When the times were bad, they reminded me that God gave St. Paul a thorn in his flesh so he would not become exalted in his own eyes. And that certainly was not a problem for me in the bad times. When the times were good, they reminded me that humility is always in order in the presidency, for in this life we see through a glass darkly, and we cannot know the whole truth of our circumstances or the motives of those who oppose us. I thank them all for bringing me closer to God and to the eternal wisdom without which a president cannot serve. I would like to say a special word of thanks to Senator Dole, and I ask you to join me in applause for his lifetime of service to the United States. And I thank Jack Kemp for his service to America and his devotion to the proposition that this is a country in which everyone should have a chance to live free and equal and to have a chance at success. Let me say, I had a good visit with Senator Dole not too long before he went out to speak. I thanked him for his love of our country, for his years of service. I applauded the campaign that he fought so bravely to the very last minute. I thanked him for the work we did together to advance the common cause of America, and on behalf of all Americans, I wish him well and Godspeed. 4 years ago, on these very steps, we set forth on a journey to change the course of America for the better, to keep the American dream alive for everyone willing to work for it, to keep America the world's strongest force for peace and freedom and prosperity, to come together as one American community. The time was one of widespread frustration and doubt about our economic and social problems, about our ability to deal with the vast sweep of change that was all around us. The scope and pace of those changes were threatening to many, and our values seemed to be under attack on all sides. But together, you and I vowed to turn our country around with a strategy to meet our challenges and protect our values. Opportunity for all, responsibility from all, an American community of all Americans. We have worked hard to end the politics of who's to blame, and instead to ask, what are we going to do to make America better? Tonight we proclaim that the vital American center is alive and well. It is the common ground on which we have made our progress. Today our economy is stronger, our streets are safer, our environment is cleaner, the world is more secure, and thank God our nation is more united. To all the men and women across this country who have created our jobs, taught our children, patrolled our streets, and kept America safe throughout our world, I say America's success is your success. This victory is your victory. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, my fellow Americans, a vast new century lies before us. It will be a time more full of opportunity for people to live out their dreams than any in human history. We have committed this night to continuing our journey, to doing the hard work that will build our bridge to the 21st century, to give the young people here and those all across America the America they deserve, and their children and their children's children. But we have work to do. We have work to do to keep our economy growing steady and strong by balancing the budget while we honor our duties to our families, our parents, and our children, and our duty to pass on to our children the earth God gave us. We have work to do to give all of our children the gift of an education, to make sure every 8-year-old can read, every 12-year-old can log on to the internet, and yes, every single 18-year-old in this country willing to work for it can have a college education. We have work to do to make the permanent underclass in this country a thing of the past, to lift our fellow citizens who are poor from the degradation of welfare dependency to the pride and dignity of work. We have work to do to strengthen our families, to help our parents succeed at home and at work, to keep our children safe from harm in their schools, their streets, their homes, and their communities, to clean up our environment so that our children grow up next to parks, not poison, to tell them that drugs are wrong and illegal and they can kill them, to teach them right from wrong. My fellow Americans, I will do all I can to advance these causes, but all our citizens must do their part to continue the upsurge of personal responsibility that in the last 4 years has brought crime to a 10-year low, child support collections to an all-time high, and reduce the welfare rolls. Will you help me do that? We must do it together. We must make our democracy stronger by enacting real, bipartisan campaign finance reform. Talk is no longer enough. We must act and act now, and the American people will be watching the leaders of both parties to see who is willing not just to talk, but to act. I am willing to act, and I ask others to join me. And we must keep America the world's indispensable nation, finishing the unfinished business of the Cold War, meeting the new threats to our security through terrorism and the proliferation of dangerous weapons, and seizing these extraordinary opportunities to extend our values of peace and democracy and prosperity. Every American here tonight and every American within the sound of my voice can take pride in the fact that in these last few years, for the first time in all of human history, a majority of the human beings living on this globe live under democracies where the people rule. The challenges we face, they're not Democratic or Republican challenges, they're American challenges. What we know from the budget battles of the last 2 years and from the remarkable success of the last few weeks of this Congress is the lesson we have learned for the last 220 years. What we have achieved as Americans of lasting good, we have achieved by working together. So let me say to the leaders of my Democratic Party and the leaders of the Republican Party, it is time to put country ahead of party. We do not know the final outcome of the congressional elections, but we know this: the races are close. The American people have been closely divided. The Congress, whatever happens, will be closely divided. They are sending us a message: work together, meet our challenges, put aside the politics of division, and build America's community together. On this beautiful night, when we have shared so much joy and so much music and so much laughter and so much pride, it is hard for me to believe that it was 23 years ago when I first began to go to the people of Arkansas to ask for their support. The most lasting and important thing that I have learned in all those 23 fleeting years is this: when we are divided, we defeat ourselves. But when we join our hands and build our families and our communities and our country, America always wins. What we need to do is to do the work of America the way we seek to do the work of raising our children and doing our work and supporting our religious institutions and our community institutions. If we would simply be Americans the way we seek to live in all of our other roles, there is no stopping America. Our best days are still ahead. And so, I say, when we look into our hearts and simply ask what is right for the American people and the future of our children, when we set aside our differences and build on our shared values of faith and family and work, when we roll up our sleeves and work together, America always wins. And my fellow Americans, America is going to keep winning these next 4 years. Let me say that, as all of you here from my native state know, I believe this and I have tried to live by it, because there is no person in America who has been given more gifts than I have. There is no person in America tonight who feels more humble in the face of this victory than I do. 50 years ago, when I was born in a summer storm to a widowed mother in a small town in the southwest part of our state, it was unimaginable that someone like me could have ever become president of the greatest country in human history. It has been, for me, a remarkable journey, not free of failure, but full of adventure and wonder and grace. I have worked hard to serve, but I did not get here on my own. Every step along the way, for these last 23 years and long before, there was a teacher, a doctor, a neighbor, a parent, a friend, a wife, a daughter, who always had time to care, who always tried to give me instruction and encouragement, and who never gave up. I got here tonight, my fellow Americans, because America gave me a chance. That is what all all the children of America deserve. Our people have to give them the tools, to give them not a guarantee, but that real chance to live up to their God-given potential. And I ask you to join me in that commitment. Every child deserves the main chance that I was given. And so I say, again, let us resolve to run our country the way we tried to run our lives. Whether you are of the party of Thomas Jefferson or the party of Abraham Lincoln, whether you're an independent or unaffiliated, remember that we all belong to the greatest nation in history. To us, much has been given and much is still expected. We must rise to the challenge of building that bridge to the 21st century. Tonight is a night for joy, not just for us here, but for all Americans. For the 53rd time in our history, our people have made their quiet and deliberate decision. They have come together with their powerful voice and expressed their will. Tonight we celebrate the miracle of America. Tomorrow we greet the dawn and begin our work anew. I am more grateful than I can say. You have given me an opportunity and a responsibility that comes to few people. I will do my best, and together we will build that bridge to the 21st century. Thank you, good night, and God bless America. Thank you.
Probably the second best night in Bill Clinton's political adult life, without going into the time that his daughter was born, of course, or when he married Hillary, but his first election as President of the United States will be with him forever. But then to make this remarkable political comeback tonight, we see fireworks over the state capital of Arkansas, the place that he launched his presidential campaign from as the governor of that state. Fireworks in his mind as well as he thinks back on his remarkable life with his daughter Chelsea at his side. Pretty emotional moment for all of them, and especially for Mrs. Clinton, who has been through a trial by fire here in the last couple of years. Very combative woman, very strong sense of herself, has been forced to step back and reorganize her place in the Clinton presidency and Bill Clinton's political life, because she's become a liability, not an asset. Bill Clinton made an overt appeal to the country and to the Republicans that we have to work together, knowing by the time he got out there tonight that it's very likely that the Republicans will keep the House of Representatives, although the margin of power will be more narrow than it was for the past 2 years, and that there's a possibility that the Republicans as well will pick up a seat or two in the United States Senate. So he started on the offensive tonight saying the country wants us to work together. And that's how we get the most done. And from Annie, a song about the future. Maria Shriver in Little Rock.
Tom, a very emotional ending to his speech. Expressed a lot of gratitude. He said he was humbled by this victory. And I don't know if you could tell, Mrs. Clinton seemed to be brushing away some tears. A lot of hugging up on that stage. A lot of tears in this audience. A tremendous amount of emotion here this evening. A lot of young people with smiles on their face, but holding each other. Certainly a night that I don't think anybody here will ever forget.
We're watching the two couples on stage now. They are the icons of the baby boomer generation.
That's
Bill
true.
Clinton and Al Gore and Tipper Gore and Hillary Clinton. They're handsome families.
They're picture perfect.
Right.
And now they're being joined on stage by his stepfather and other members of the family. Tom, there's a lot of young people here. I don't know if you could hear when President Clinton thanked the White House staff and volunteers. There was a tremendous amount of applause. And if you could look at these young people's faces, you do see a tremendous amount of hope in this political process when so many people, I think, are quite cynical.
Well, it'll be an interesting test for Bill Clinton for the next 4 years is to whether or not he can kind of kickstart, if you will, the idea that politics is an honorable profession. It's how he got involved, and I dare say Tim Russert, who sits at my side, my own interest began at an early age. A lot of that's been lost in this country. People don't pay attention to it anymore. They don't think of it as a place that they want to go. They certainly don't think of it as something that they want to get involved in, either on a part-time or a full-time basis, Tim.
Absolutely, Tom. And I think President Clinton tried to reach out to Republicans tonight, in part because of his own self-interest. He does not want to go through 4 years of investigations and hearings and that kind of ordeal, and he knows that real problems confront us. I think he's going to have to give, however, as much as he's going to take, because it's going to be real compromise and consensus on a lot of issues like Medicare and welfare and taxes and education, and he won't be able to point the finger and say, you're the blame, you're the radical, you're the excessive one, if he's asking for their cooperation.
I think the first thing he has to do, even before his inauguration in January, he has to come very fast out of the box and talk about campaign finance reform and say, listen, we've all been guilty of it in the past year. I acknowledge the part of my party, and the Republicans have to acknowledge their part as well. We're going to clean up this mess. In the past, money has been called the mother's milk of politics. And in fact, what money has done is given mother's milk a bad name in this campaign, because so much money, more than 55% that was raised 4 years ago by the Democratic National Committee, more than 75% by the Republican National Committee, hundreds of millions of dollars from all over the world, from people who obviously want influence and want the president's ear. Tim, we have some more races that we're prepared to call now. Let's take a look at the Senate races around the country, because that chamber still is in play tonight. But first, let's go to Alaska, where Bob Dole, no surprise there, he is the projected winner in the state of Alaska with its 3 electoral votes. None of the candidates visited Alaska this time, by the way. It was a mistake that Richard Nixon made when he ran against John Kennedy. He said he was going to visit all the states, and he went all the way to Alaska. It's a long way up there. So we give Bob Dole Alaska tonight. He's our projected winner there, 135 electoral votes. Bill Clinton well on his way to a landslide victory. Here is a real victory for the Democrats. Tim Johnson, who has been the statewide representative in South Dakota, knocks off Larry Pressler, who has been the senator from that state for a long time, powerful chair of the House Commerce Committee. And in Alaska as well, Ted Stevens, who is a senator for life from that state. He really is a very powerful figure in the Republican Party, and he's been reelected. In Montana, Max Baucus, who thought he was in a tough race at the outset, wins pretty handily. He keeps that seat for the Democrats. So the Senate chamber at this hour, this is how it stands. The Republicans are up 2 seats right now. We still have Colorado outstanding and a couple of other races outstanding, but the Republicans can expand their majority in the Senate tonight, Tim.
3 seats open, Tom. New Hampshire, Oregon, Colorado, all held by the Republicans. Even if the Democrats win all 3 seats, the Republicans will still have a majority of the United States Senate.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back with more on the House of Representatives, more on those Senate seats, more on the balance of power in the Congress of the United States, more on your future, the political future of this country, after this. This is Decision 96 on NBC. Little Rock, Arkansas. We just heard from Vice President Al Gore and President Clinton tonight, talking about the next 4 years, about the importance of the presidency and the Congress working together, because it's pretty clear now the Republicans will retain control of Capitol Hill. Let's go now to Little Rock. NBC's Maria Shriver there with the White House Chief of Staff, at least for the moment, Leon Panetta. Maria?
Thank you very much, Tom. The president walked out here tonight, Mr. Panetta. He seemed rather somber, was he?
Well, I think he had just had a prayer with his minister, and I think he was thinking at that moment about what it meant, what the American people had done, and the next 4 years and the responsibilities. He's someone who really takes that deep to his heart, and I think it showed a little tonight.
Does the work of this new administration start tomorrow morning?
Without question. This president, if anything, always likes to hit the ground running, and I think that's what's going to happen with these next 4 years. First responsibility is obviously to put the team together for the next administration, to begin to focus on the policies that he's got to implement with this Congress now, and to, I think the first order of business is to begin work on the budget.
How quickly does he need to put this new team into effect?
I think what we're focusing on is trying to see if we can get the team put in place by the end of the year so that as we get into January, we can begin to focus on the policies and themes that he'll make for his inaugural.
Is he considering, there are some reports he's considering bringing some Republicans into the inner circle, into the cabinet. Is he talking about that?
None of those decisions have been made. What I'm doing now, I'm really in charge of the transition, and so what I'm trying to do is to assemble, the names of those that he should be able to consider for purposes of putting his team together.
But you would not rule out any Republicans.
No, not at all.
After all, tonight he came out and asked for the country to come together. Wouldn't it be beneficial for him to include some in his cabinet?
Well, I don't think there's any question. In line with the theme of trying to assert, hopefully, a bipartisan agenda where Republicans and Democrats can work together to try to fulfill the themes that he set for the country, I think it's extremely important that we reach out to everyone who might be able to contribute. So it's going to be based, hopefully, on those who are best qualified to serve in those positions, and that could include some Republicans.
Thank you very much. Men and women. Leon Panetta. Back to you, Tom.
All right. Thank you very much, Maria Shriver. We heard the president tonight appealing, obviously, for unity as he has to work with the Republican Congress. The House and the Senate, it appears, will remain in Republican hands, although the numbers will be reduced on the Republican side. NBC's Lisa Myers, who covers Capitol Hill for us, is there now. Lisa, if the numbers get down far enough on the Republican side, what are the chances that Speaker Newt Gingrich would be challenged from within his own party?
I think that the numbers would have to go down significantly to the point that at which the Republicans only had a 2 or 3 vote margin in the House, at which point anything is possible. The Speaker also still has that ethics investigation hanging over his head, something which the House Ethics Committee has promised to resolve by the end of the year. There's some very serious charges involved, including whether the Speaker may have not told the entire truth to the Ethics Committee during its investigation. So certainly if the margin were close enough, the Speaker could be in danger, but otherwise I just don't see any kind of move on him at this point.
What about the Republican Party agenda for the next 2 years under Speaker Gingrich? What about the contract with America? How much of that stays intact? How much do they begin to try to move a little bit toward the center? I don't mean to the center, but toward the center.
Well, certainly the goals of the contract are still in place, but they did not renew the contract this year. There is no agreed upon agenda going into the next term of Congress. Now, Senator Trent Lott, the majority leader, has said that the top of his agenda will be a growth package in the Senate. He also wants to see, now that he's picking up a number of Republican votes, whether he can pass that balanced budget amendment, which failed by only 1 vote. I do think, though, you are going to find the House Republicans moderate a little bit. First of all, they got killed on the issues of Medicare and education. And one of the things the Speaker says that they're going to do is, before they do anything, they're going to educate the American people. So they define the agenda and don't let President Clinton do it for them.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa Myers, on Capitol Hill tonight. We want to go now. You hear a lot about political wizards in Washington. This is one of the chief gnomes of this business that we're all involved in. This is Charlie Cook, who runs his own political newsletter, highly regarded by people from all the parties, all the way down to the Greens and the Natural Law Party. Charlie, what do you make of what's happened in the Congress of the United States tonight?
Well, the computer models are telling us that Democrats are going to gain 10 seats, which would be 9 short of what they need, give or take 4 seats. But we've got about 35 very close races that I'm watching that we still don't know the outcome. So I think, it's very, very clear that Republicans are going to hold the House, but whether it's a single or a double-digit loss in terms of seats, we don't know yet.
And that's key, obviously, to the future of the House, not only in terms of its agenda, but the kinds of people who lead the House, right?
No, it absolutely is. And for Democrats, there's sort of mixed emotions where they certainly wanted to win the House back, but the worst thing they could have done is to get control of the House but not have enough seats to really do anything. But I think clearly, as Lisa mentioned, I think moderates are really going to be in the catbird seat, the liberal to moderate Republicans and the conservative to moderate Democrats.
Is that how you would describe the ideological profile of the country tonight based on the presidential election, the Senate election, and the House election?
I think clearly the American people are between the two 40-yard lines, and I think we're going to see a Congress this time which is going to be a lot closer to that point than it was when Democrats were in control before '94 and for the last 2 years under Republicans.
Charlie, you've spent virtually the last 48 months getting ready for this night, certainly the last 24 months. What surprised you most of all about tonight?
I guess it's frustrating that the House is coming in so slow. The presidential race, the Senate races, we were knowing very, very fast, and the House comes so slow, and it's so important. And so for us really junkies that like to watch this stuff, it's just like it's agonizing waiting for some of these races to get close enough to call.
On the other hand, Charlie, it extends our interest.
That's right. But we're having a lot of fun. But it's a lot of really, really hotly contested races out there. I think it's going to be a long night before we really know anywhere near the right number for the number of Democratic gains.
All right. Thank you very much, Charlie Cook. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
This comes under the heading of whoops in a big way. Earlier tonight, we projected that Sweat would be the new Democratic senator from the state of New Hampshire. We now withdraw that, and we project that Bob Smith will be returned to the United States Senate. He was the Republican incumbent. He is the Republican. Republicans are in red. The R's are pretty tiny. We'll give you that, and so are the D's. But the blue bar belongs to the Democrats, the red bar to the Republicans. So Bob Smith, a Republican, going back to the United States Senate. Sometimes happens. We apologize for it. It doesn't change the final result. We can say that somebody won, but the voters ultimately have the last determination. Tim, what about a landslide? There'll be a lot of discussion about that tomorrow. It's obviously an electoral landslide for Bill Clinton. He's going to go over 400 electoral votes. He's going to win a lot of states.
This is remarkable. In 1972, Richard Nixon, landslide second election, he won 12 Republican House seats, lost 2 Senate seats. Ronald Reagan, 84, won 14 Republican House seats, lost 2 Senate seats. 96, Clinton looks like he's going to win about 10 Democratic House seats and lose 2 Democratic Senate seats. The parallels are striking. Some bad news for President Clinton, however. The stock market went up 85% in his first term. Under Roosevelt and under Wilson, Tom, a second-term Democratic president, the stock market has gone down rather significantly.
Well, a lot of people have been wondering about the market. It's been on a real roll, and we'll see what happens. We'll begin to know tomorrow.
If Republicans hold both houses, that should be good news for Wall Street.
Yep, I would think so. Let's go back down to Little Rock, Arkansas now, and NBC's Maria Shriver there with a man who is... tell Maria, by the way, that Jesse has second billing. Maria, tell Jesse that he has second billing. His son was on first on NBC tonight, and that's the way it's going to be from now on.
I told him, Tom Brokaw says to tell you from now on you're going to have second billing to your son, but I think you wouldn't mind that.
I did it tonight, and it was a setup on Tom Brokaw's part. But I'm so proud of Jesse. I'm glad about it.
Let me see, you went out and stumped for this ticket extensively, visited more than 40 states. What difference do you think you made for Bill Clinton and Al Gore?
Well, we certainly tried to focus on voter registration, voter turnout, and building coalition. We must begin to de-racialize these race-wedge politics. For example, the focus on welfare. The subtext is race, but in reality, most poor people are not on welfare. They work every day, whether they're chopping chickens in processing plants or cleaning hospitals and hotels. And most poor people are not black or brown. They're white, they're female and young. If we can de-racialize this issue and take the edge off, we can begin to address it morally and not just politically. The same is true with the affirmative action issue. The most beneficiaries of affirmative action, they're women and people of color and the disabled, so it's a majority, not a minority issue. We sought the build and the heal coalition.
Affirmative action was a hotbed issue in this country, still a big race on that subject going on in California. Did you feel at times like we've turned back the clock on some of these issues?
Well, there's certainly resistance to equal opportunity, for opening up the doors. I thought the other day when Mr. Dole said he drove back and forth to work and saw unemployed black men on the corner, and therefore he didn't support affirmative action. First of all, blacks are neither the primary beneficiaries nor the majority beneficiaries of affirmative action. It's the disabled, women, and people of color. It's a majority, not a minority issue. I hope our leaders will stop race-baiting this issue, stop dividing us, and allow us to find to be united. After all, there's an intractable level of poverty among the working poor and the unemployed. We must lift those persons up and not leave them behind.
Bill Clinton has talked extensively throughout this campaign about building a bridge into the 21st century. What kind of bridge does he need to build into the black community to get them to get out to support him?
Not exclusive to the blacks. My point is that the 40 million in poverty, 29 million are white. And whether white, black, or brown, we can wipe out malnutrition without wiping out the malnourished. We still must know in every major city there are 2 new buildings, a new ballpark and a new jail. We must make the commitment to figure out ways to lift our youth up and not to lock them up. I still make the case. It makes more sense to invest in prenatal care, Head Start, scholarships, and daycare on the front side of life than jail care and welfare on the back side. And that is a bridge that we must build American to American.
What role are you hoping to play in this next administration? He pleaded tonight to people of all races, colors, political affiliations. Do you want to play a role?
The role I really want to play is to be a part of America's coalition of conscience, a commitment to lift those who are locked out. After we measure our character by how we treat the least of these, and there is a body of American people tonight who don't have PAC money, who do not lobby, who cannot have press conferences, and they need and they deserve our help. Just as Bill Clinton could get from Hope, Arkansas to the White House, there's some other people in the hopes of America, and they deserve the same bridge he got. I want to work with him on that bridge.
Terrific. Reverend Jesse Jackson, thanks so much. Always nice to see you. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Maria Shriver. In California, there are some hotly debated and controversial propositions on the ballot. One would legalize marijuana for medical use. A doctor could prescribe marijuana for glaucoma and for cancer victims. And Tim Russert, that's passing tonight. In fact, we're projecting, in fact, that will win. That's Proposition 215. The other, even more controversial issue out there is whether or not they should have affirmative action for public institutions, for public hiring, and for the universities and so on. And the latest numbers that you have is that is passing by a factor of 2 to 1. That is that they would eliminate affirmative action in California at the public institutions.
And Bob Dole tried to make that, in his words, a wedge issue, Tom. And yet, even though that's passing nearly 2 to 1, Bill Clinton is winning California by a landslide. Right. So they didn't hold it against Bill Clinton. On the drug issue, drug czar McCaffrey, former Surgeon General Koop, 3 former presidents, all pleaded with California not to do that wrong signal to send to young people. And they think many people who supported that particular referendum, their long-term hope is to have legalization of drugs, period.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any question about that they see this as the first step. And the thing to remember about California and these propositions is, and that's where very often national trends begin. Tax reduction, that all began there. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 as you look at 30 Rockefeller Plaza on this election night, now Wednesday morning, here in the East.
This is an NBC News election update. Here is Bob Kerr.
Hello again. President Clinton thanked the American people and saluted Senator Dole in Little Rock tonight. Earlier, we heard a gracious and eloquent concession speech from Mr. Dole. All this against a backdrop of some big wins for the president in traditional Republican strongholds across the South, from Florida to Louisiana, Kentucky, and on to Arizona. The president scored surprising victories over Bob Dole. Mr. Clinton also won Ohio and the 2 biggest prizes, California and New York. In the battle for the House of Representatives, it now appears Republicans will retain control, but perhaps with a reduced margin. And it seems the Republicans will maintain their majority in the Senate. Now, the news tonight is not simply about the man who has won the White House. It's also about what he faces in a House and Senate that now appears will retain their Republican majorities. For some insight, let's turn to NBC's Gwen Eiffel, who joins us again from the Capitol tonight. Hi, Gwen.
Hi, Bob.
Well, listen, here are the numbers. Someone told me 223 Republican in the House, 208 Democrat, 2 independent, and that could go up or down by about 5. What kind of Congress is it going to be?
It's going to be a Congress that was bought and paid for in large part by special interest groups. One of the things that, as you know, dominated this race for the past several days on the presidential level was money. Who was raising it and who was spending it. On the presidential level, we know what happened, and it has happened as well in House and Senate races. And that's that local special interest groups targeted these districts. Even groups like the Christian Coalition, without specifically endorsing candidates, targeted certain districts and targeted certain groups and found a way to sway voters. It also obviously affected people's decision to vote for a sort of divided government in states like California, for instance, where Bill Clinton won big, some of his issues didn't win big. It was an interesting mixed bag.
Gwen, a lot of Congresswoman Pat Schroeder was on earlier, and she said that support for doing something about this campaign financing usually wanes after an election. I think it's going to be different this time, don't you, because of the investigations and pressure that'll be on?
Well, you know, I think it almost waned during. I think what happens is that people in both sides have to agree to unilaterally disarm in order for something to happen, and neither will do it. You see, what is happening, the worst of what's happening is perfectly legal, and investigations can't usually get to the root of anything illegal. The illegal parts of this are just the tip of the iceberg about what's wrong with the campaign financing system, so even investigations won't really fix the problem.
Thanks, Gwen. NBC's Gwen Ifill tonight at the U.S. Capitol. There were a lot of interesting issues on the ballots in many states. In Florida, the vote was no on the sugar tax, which means sugar growers will not be taxed to pay for the cleanup of the Everglades. In Colorado, it was no to a controversial measure that would have mandated parental rights, but in California, the answer was yes to another highly provocative proposal, this one about marijuana. Let's get details from NBC's Pete Williams in Washington now. Pete, how are you?
Very well, Bob, and a similar measure on the ballot in Arizona, which also appears to be passing. In both states, in both California and Arizona, these initiatives would not legalize marijuana. They wouldn't decriminalize the possession of marijuana. They would simply give people who used it a legal defense in court if they could show that they were given permission or a prescription, in essence, or a recommendation to use it by a doctor for a medical condition. Now, many people have said that marijuana, and only marijuana, provides them with relief from the symptoms of long-term diseases like cancer and AIDS, relief from pain and nausea, and that marijuana is the only way they can get this. So this initiative now will allow them to use it for medical purposes and potentially provide them with a defense in court. And as a matter of practical effect, I think it simply means that they won't be prosecuted for it.
Well, Pete,
now,
does this open a Pandora's box, really, in the legal community? I mean, what if somebody grows marijuana, sells marijuana, gets marijuana, says, look, I'm under stress, I have a medical condition. What are law enforcement people thinking about this?
Well, that's exactly the argument that the opponents used against it. They said, you know, a nurse could tell you, you look nervous, you ought to have some marijuana, and you can grow your own. They say this is not regulated like a drug. People could provide their own marijuana of all kinds of varying strength. And the opponents were saying, if we really need marijuana, if we really need the drug there, then let's create it like a drug and let's regulate it like a drug. They really fear that this is the beginning of an attempt to legalize marijuana nationwide.
Pete, you cover the Supreme Court. Let me ask you, one of the high-stakes matters in any presidential election is that the person who wins gets to pick the next justices and have a big impact on things for years to come. What's likely to happen?
Well, you get to do that if somebody on the court steps down. That's what has to happen first. And that's an open question of what's going to happen. For a long time, we all thought that Chief Justice William Rehnquist, who's been on the court for 24 years, might be ready to step down. Now we're not so sure. He's had recent surgery. He feels much better. The same thing for the other two senior-most justices on the court, Sandra Day O'Connor and John Paul Stevens. Not at all certain they'll step down. But let's play what if. Suppose they do. Most people seem to agree that if Sandra Day O'Connor steps down, the president would be strongly tempted to appoint another woman. Possible nominees, Janet Reno, his current attorney general, and Judith Kaye, a senior state judge in New York. Others say that the president is very tempted, if one of the two male justices steps down, Rehnquist or Stevens, president is very tempted possibly to make some history and appoint the first Hispanic to the Supreme Court. A likely contender there would be Jose Cabranes, a federal judge. And finally, the president may be tempted to appoint somebody from the political branches, like his friend George Mitchell or possibly Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt, Bob.
Pete Williams, thank you very much tonight.
You bet.
And so the race between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole is over. Here is how these two very different men from very different generations summed up the night.
Some things never change. A few days after I took my seat in the state legislature, a reporter asked me what I had on my agenda. And I said, well, I'm going to sit back and watch for a few days. And then I'll stand up for what I think is right. And any of you wondering what my plans may be in the future, I'm going to sit back for a few days. Then I'm going to start standing up for what I think is right for America and right
for you. I am more grateful than I can say. You have given me an opportunity and a responsibility that comes to few people. I will do my best, and together we will build that bridge to the 21st century. Thank you, good night, and God bless America. Thank you.
Poignant speeches tonight in Little Rock and in Washington. That is Decision 96. Bill Clinton soundly defeats Bob Dole and wins a second term as president. I'm Bob Kerr in New York. Decision 96 continues here on NBC.
From NBC News election headquarters in New York, Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again, everyone. It is 1 o'clock on a Wednesday morning in the East. It is 10 o'clock in the evening in the Pacific time zone. And in Bill Clinton's hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, it is forever, or it's 4 more years at least, in the White House. Bill Clinton elected President of the United States tonight. About 73% of the precincts have been counted so far across the country. Clinton holding steady at 50% of the popular vote. Bob Dole back at 42%. And Ross Perot failing to break into double digits. In Colorado, one of the states that's too close to call, more than half the precincts have been counted. Dole leading Clinton there by a single percentage point. Remember, Dole is in red. He's the Republican, obviously, and Bill Clinton is the Democrat in blue. Ross Perot down around 6 and 7% as he is in the state of Georgia. Bob Dole has been leading by a point all night long. We're now up to 85% of the precincts counted there so far. Max Cleland does get Sam Nunn's Senate seat in Georgia. In Montana, one of the states that Bill Clinton won surprisingly 4 years ago, he now has a narrow lead over Bob Dole with just under 40% of the precincts counted. Almost 40% of the precincts have been counted in Nevada. And in that tabulation, as you can see, Bill Clinton there with a lead of about 1,800 votes, just 1 percentage point over Bob Dole. That's one of the states that Bob Dole had hoped that he would pick up. There are still lots of congressional races still to be resolved tonight. At last count, more than 30 of them altogether. But it does appear that the Republicans will retain control of the Senate tonight and maybe even pick up a vote or two. NBC's Brian Williams is still out there in what we finally decided, I guess, was prom night at MTV. Brian, what are you seeing from the polls?
Well, interesting numbers backing up what we've seen come true during the night, Tom. Everything was kind of foreshadowed during the evening. You mentioned a lot of talk about the networks calling these races, and we are privy to some numbers earlier in the evening than we report them. Something Tim alluded to earlier is what the issues are, that what voters think life in the next generation will be like. People are pretty evenly split, optimists and pessimists tonight. Bill Clinton, it strikes me, we keep talking about returning him to the White House for 4 years. He doesn't own a home, it's important to point out. I don't know what he would have done had he been turned away tonight. Probably find a good real estate agent and go on from there. But the president who does not own a home has been granted at least temporary shelter for the next 4 years again by the American people tonight.
All right, thank you very much, Brian Williams. The country has identified itself in recent years as by and large moderate to moderate right. Let's talk about that now some with two of our pollsters who have been helping us out, as they might say. That's Peter Hart on your right and Bob Teeter on your left. That's an opposite. That's a kind of mirror image of where they stand in the political spectrum. Peter Hart has worked primarily for Democrats in his lifetime, and Mr. Teeter has worked primarily for Republicans. Gentlemen, what's the shape of the country ideologically based on what we've seen here tonight? Let's begin with you, Bob Teeter.
Well, I think, Tom, you just said it. The country is a centrist country. We learned that over again. It is a little center-right right now. Whatever swings it takes, a little to the left, a little to the right, occur within a very narrow arc. And I think this election shows beyond any doubt that it is a very centrist country, just a little to the center-right.
So when Newt Gingrich goes back to the House of Representatives, what kind of claims can he make on the political soul of the country based on what we've seen here tonight?
Well, I think he'll recognize from the results that the country wants the president and the Congress to work together. There isn't any question about that. They've wanted it all along. I think it was only at the end of this Congress they did, and probably helped a number of incumbents. But one of the problems the Republicans had in the presidential race this year clearly was the fact that they were perceived as being very obstinate and having a major role in closing down the government.
And Peter Hart, how do you see the election so far?
Well, I think it's a great night in terms of incumbents. Incumbents run right across the nation. The second thing is exactly what Bob said. It's the middle of the electorate. And President Clinton put it well. He said, country above party. And I think any of the incumbents who come back better understand that message. There isn't a revolution. It is doing the job that needs to be done. And the reason the incumbents won is because we felt the nation was going in the right direction. The economy was working, and that combination of things put a lot of incumbents back into Washington.
In a curious way, the country was saying that 2 years ago we got your attention. You seem now to be doing some of the things that we'd like, so we're going to give you a kind of a second shot. Peter?
I think it is a new lease on life, but part of the lease on life was that we did things that the country wanted, and part of that is like the minimum wage. That wasn't part of the contract, but it was part of what the country wanted. So changes that the Republicans got the message, and at the same time, President Clinton got the message. The one other thing I would say is both Senator Dole and President Clinton went out and talked in a stylish manner tonight, and I think served themselves and the country well.
Let's take a look now at the national map, and all of us will bring Tim Russert in on this as well, remembering that Bill Clinton is in blue and Bob Dole is in red and Ross Perot is in gray. He's not one state. In fact, he's failed to break into double digits in any one of those states. As you look at the country now, as it kind of settles in at the presidential level, is this what we can call a quasi-permanent realignment of America? What we can expect to see in the next few election cycles, where Republicans are going to do well and Democrats are going to do well, Tim?
Well, it's quite striking, Tom. There had been talk of a Republican Electoral College lock over the last couple elections. That doesn't seem to hold anymore. George Bush got 38% of the vote in 1992. Bob Dole looking around 40% in 96. And if you look at that map, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Far West, more and more solid Democrat. The Republicans have basically the plain states, Texas, and the Southeast. Florida becomes the pivotal swing state in presidential elections.
And Teeter and Hart, this is your field. Why is that? Why, for example, will Bill Clinton be doing so well in places like Arizona, New Mexico, as well as California and the Pacific Northwest?
Well, clearly Medicare had something to do with him carrying Florida and Arizona. And Tim's right, is that Republicans were competitive electorally because they had a point where they could count on Florida and Texas, then win in California, and then win 2 or 3 of those big industrial Midwestern states. And they didn't do any of those things tonight, and thereby setting up Bill Clinton's electoral landslide.
Peter, okay, go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say one thing, Tom, and that is 21 states that Reagan and Bush carried in the 80s have now been carried twice by Bill Clinton, and that's that Midwest industrial territory as well as some of the Sun Belt.
Well, let me give you my own view as well. I think especially in the Southwest and in the Far West and the Pacific Northwest, you have a lot of young women who are taking their place in the social fabric and in the professional fabric of this country, and they're playing an ever more prominent role, not only in politics, but in business and in education and kind of setting the agenda, if you will.
Issues matter, Tom, and if you look at a coalition of women, minorities, and new immigrants, the Democrats have fashioned a pretty interesting agenda to keep them in their fold now and at least for the next couple cycles. But let it not be lost on us. The Republicans, if they hold Congress, this is the first time in 30 years Republicans have been elected to 2 successive Congresses, and the first time in history where there's been a Democratic president and a Republican Congress elected the same year. And 2 years from now, as a midterm election and a Democratic president, you can look for significant Republican gains if history continues to be borne out.
All right, Bob Teeter, Peter Hart, Tim Russert, thank you very much. Gentlemen, stand by. We'll have more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. From our election headquarters in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Picture within a picture. That's 30 Rockefeller Plaza overlooking the ice skating rink. And if Bill Clinton were here tonight, he'd be down there skating to his heart's delight, obviously, because he's been reelected president of the United States, the first Democrat since Franklin Roosevelt. And of course, it was not an easy glide in. He's had a rough couple of years, but this is a real triumph for him tonight. The big story, of course, still the Congress of the United States. We want to show you now the shape of the House of Representatives so far as we can determine it at this hour. There are still outstanding close races, especially in the West. It takes 218 to be a majority in the House. The Republicans have 223, Democrats 208. That's a loss of 13 seats for the Republicans right now. Now, that can change up or down in the coming hours or so. We want to go to NBC's Lisa Myers, who's been talking with a lot of people behind the scenes. What's the best guess there, Lisa? Are they going to get down to down to single digits in terms of the Republican margin, or are they going to be able to keep it at 12 or 13?
No, I think the Republicans think that they will keep their losses into the single digits. I mean, some of the freshmen who have been in big trouble have held on tonight. There have been a lot of pickups in the open Democratic seats. In fact, right now in some of the races that have been called, the Republicans have lost 11 seats and picked up 11 Democratic open seats. I mean, I think that if the evening ends up this way, Speaker Gingrich may be down on that rink skating too. Certainly his own people had thought that the Republicans might come out of tonight with a 2-seat gain, but if they could keep their losses to single digits, given the year they've been through and the kind of victory the president is rolling up tonight, I think they'll be very happy. What
do you think Newt Gingrich's attitude will be, his demeanor as he comes back to Washington, given what's happened here tonight? The big victory for Bill Clinton and the loss of some seats on the Republican side.
I think the speaker is someone who thinks and learns his lessons. What we saw this spring was a much more humble Newt Gingrich than we saw last fall and winter. He admitted he was outmaneuvered by the president badly. He failed to foresee some of the strategic traps that were built for him, and at times he personally did not perform very well. I mean, he shouted a few things that he wished he could have back and said a few things that really caused a great deal of embarrassment to his party. He has tried to be much more calm, more under control, and to stay in the background and do more thinking and strategizing and let others who are more popular take the front role.
All right, thanks very much, Lisa Myers tonight. Let's take a look now at the U.S. Senate. Lisa covers that as well, but we'll be talking with Gwen Ifill in just a few moments. Here's a race that's too close to call. More than half of the precincts have been tabulated so far. Wayne Allard is a Republican. He hopes to succeed Hank Brown, the retiring senator from Colorado. He's got a 6-point lead, but we simply can't make a projection there. Here's another very tight race in Oregon. These are two newcomers, and the retiring seat is Mark Hatfield's. The Democrat is Berger, and the state Senate president, I think, Mr. Smith. They've got just a point separating them now, but only 15% of the precincts have been counted so far. These are two millionaires, by the way. We've had a number of those matchups across the country. So the United States Senate at this hour, we show the Republicans gaining 2 seats, but that can change up or down depending what happens in Colorado and in Oregon. What's the impact going to be on national politics? What does this do to Bill Clinton? Well, let's check in now with NBC's Gwen Ifill, who's been keeping track of the Senate for us tonight. Gwen, good morning.
Hi. Good morning, Tom. That's right. Well, it's a mixed bag for Bill Clinton. I mean, what he sees happening here is a whole lot of troubles ahead. He wins big in his own race, but he still has an even bigger problem to deal with when it comes to dealing with this Republican Congress. It's a Republican Congress, by the way, which, not coincidentally, owes its seats to all the money that was poured into these races, not only early on by labor groups like the AFL-CIO, but also later on by groups like the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and the national parties. Loopholes which allow hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to be spent above and beyond the campaign limits that the people imagined in the post-Watergate reforms. So a lot of cash greased the way into this new Congress. But what it does is sets up a lot of rows and hills for Bill Clinton to climb. He figured out a way to finesse working with the Republican Congress last time, but this one may be a little bit more intransigent and a little bit more wounded.
All right, thank you very much, Gwen Ifill, as we watch these continuing realignments in the House and in the Senate. mostly in the Republican favor, I hasten to point out. It's not a complete realignment, but there's a diminution of power for the Republicans in the House, but there may be a gain for the Republicans when it comes to the Senate. Bruguiere, the Democrat in Oregon, may take that seat away from Mark Hatfield. On the other hand, the Republicans could hang on to their seat in Colorado. So this is still to be resolved, Tim.
Absolutely, Tom. You were talking earlier about what do we have to look forward to. I think initially tomorrow, the Democrats will want a bumper sticker which says, President Clinton, deal with it. The Republicans will counter with Speaker Gingrich, deal with it. I think if those two men could get together privately and say, hey, ethics investigation in the House go away, ethics investigation in the White House go away, let's make a deal. They'd love to do it. The problem is it's beyond that. It's now special prosecutors, and it's just taken its whole new life in the criminal process system.
It may look too much like politics as usual if they do that.
And that's a problem. But the best way to deal with the criminal investigations, Tom, deal with campaign finance, deal with Medicare straight up early on, and let people say, you know, these men are trying to work together for the best of the country, and maybe let the chips fall a little bit more slowly on the criminal front.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, if this was anything, it was a wake-up call to the politicians in this country, that the voters are simply fed up with attack ads and too much money and going after each other on personal issues rather than on the common concerns of the country. Someone who is going back to the United States Senate had something to say at his headquarters not so long ago. The venerable Jesse Helms in North Carolina. Here's what he had to say tonight.
I'm going to continue to do everything I can to encourage a restoration of this country's moral and spiritual values. And I can guarantee you one thing, there's going to be 6 more years of torment for Ted Kennedy and all those other.
Well, he's still the master of the phrase. He knows how to put the red meat out there for his followers.
So
Jesse
much
Helms.
for harmony.
Right. And in Havana tonight, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Jesse Helms, in Havana tonight, Fidel Castro, is talking to his people right now. The chances of anything happening in Cuban-American relations in terms of lightening up on the embargo, you have to get past the considerable political body of Jesse Helms to have that happen. Seems pretty unlikely, Tim.
But, Tom, I was also thinking tonight, Senator Dole, who's retiring from politics, praised and thanked the media. I heard nothing from President Clinton about the media tonight.
No. You know, by the way, Jesse Helms is an interesting story. David Brinkley always said that he was partly responsible for the rise of Jesse Helms because Jesse Helms was a political commentator on television in North Carolina in the early days of Huntley Brinkley at the height of the civil rights movement. Huntley Brinkley would come on, and then Jesse Helms would come on right after them and tell the viewers of North Carolina why those two guys up north were so wrong. And so David always liked to say, so I was partly responsible for the rise of Jesse Helms. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Not bad, Broker.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
We're back, 30 Rockefeller Plaza there. I half expect to see Jimmy Cagney singing Yankee Doodle Dandy and dancing between those flags during here at Rockefeller Plaza in the course of this evening. We want to talk about what is going on tonight, and we know that Bob Dole has lost to Bill Clinton, obviously. Clinton, the first Democrat to be reelected since Franklin Roosevelt. We still are not sure what the margin is going to be in the House of Representatives, although it appears clear that the Republicans will retain control. And in the Senate, there's a possibility that the Republicans will even pick up a seat or two. We'll be talking about this throughout the course of the rest of our election coverage. We want to tell you right now, some stations will be cutting away from our coverage. Others will be staying with us here on Decision 96. We're back now. In the state of New Jersey tonight, Bob Torricelli, who is one of the more liberal members of the United States Congress, was elected to the Senate. He'll take over the seat from the retiring Bill Bradley. That means it stays in the Democratic column. And in Minnesota tonight, Senator Wellstone was reelected. He is easily the most liberal member of the United States Senate. He voted against welfare reform. He held off Rudy Boschwitz, former Republican senator, in a rematch out there. Here's what these two winning gentlemen had to say tonight in their statements to their supporters.
It's important to recognize some of the reasons why people came to our sides. We all understand that it is time for government to recognize that it must do less. A new respect for the taxpayers, an understanding of the limits of the role of government. But it is also a lesson to be remembered that because government cannot do everything, does not teach us that it can do nothing.
We must, we will continue to do everything we can, all of us together, to reduce the violence, too much violence in homes, in schools, and in communities.
Paul Wellstone really is one of the most remarkable stories in American politics these days. At a time when everybody is racing for the center or beyond, Paul Wellstone has stayed very much with his own liberal agenda. He's a child of the 60s. He was an upset victor 6 years ago. Now he comes in. He gets elected to a second full term in the United States Senate, and it raises the whole question about, are liberals still alive in America, Tim?
Unabashedly, Tom, in terms of Minnesota.
Right.
But that's one of the few left. It truly is. More and more of that center gravitation by members of the Senate, led by their president, Bill Clinton. Many fellow Democrats called him Republican light, but his campaign paid off because he was able to co-opt many of those cultural and social issues.
All right, let's ask Jonathan Walter about that. Jonathan Walter, of course, is a Newsweek columnist, and he is now with NBC News as well. Jonathan, is Wellstone the exception?
I really think that he's the exception in terms of that kind of liberalism. But, Tom, one of the striking patterns of this year is that the game of pin the liberal tail on the Democratic donkey, screaming liberal, 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 and trying to beat Democrats did not work this year, not only in Minnesota and New Jersey, but also in Iowa, in Michigan, in Rhode Island, in Georgia. Each one of those campaigns featured Republicans running ad after ad that was essentially yelling liberal, liberal, pants on fire, and it didn't work. In each one of those races I mentioned, the Democrat won. So while liberalism isn't popular, I think the game plan that Republicans have been going to for several elections now of just trying to stigmatize their opponents as liberals is no longer working the way it once did, Tom.
Jonathan, we're old friends, but they're telling me in my ear that I have called you Jonathan Walter twice tonight. The first time I think I got it corrected. This time I just added the extra W. I do apologize for that. You are Alter without the W.
That is not the slightest problem, Tom.
But, well, after all, I paid for your lunch today, so I get to do whatever I want to with your name. Jonathan, but what happens, do you think, to Paul Wellstone and Torricelli in the United States Senate in the next 6 years? Are they isolated, or to be effective, are they going to have to move themselves a little more to the center?
Well, I think Wellstone is kind of a Jesse Helms of the left. He will stake out a very liberal, rather unpopular position on the American spectrum. Torricelli, on the other hand, will go along with a lot of other Democrats in trying to work in the center. He did that in the House of Representatives. Many of these Democrats who were elected, who they attempted to stigmatize as liberals, will be part of a new governing vital center in the United States Senate. And if they can work with some moderate Republicans, they might actually get some things done.
All right, thanks very much. Jonathan Alter with an A. Jonathan, we'll be seeing you later in the course of our coverage, obviously.
Okay.
We're going to go back to California now, and George Lewis, who has been covering California politics for a long, long time. George, tonight the marijuana initiative was on the ballot. It's passing overwhelmingly out there. Doctors will have, what, the right to prescribe marijuana for cancer patients and glaucoma patients and other people who can come up with an excuse?
Yeah, it's so broadly worded, Tom, that you could probably say, hey, I stubbed my toe, it hurts, I need a joint, my doctor said it was okay, and it would be legal. It's also going to be challenged in the courts. You can always count on the California voters, as you know, Tom, to come up with some maverick ideas. While they were passing the marijuana initiative, they also passed Proposition 209, which is the so-called California Civil Rights Initiative, which eliminates affirmative action programs in state hiring and education, and that's going to be challenged in the courts too, Tom.
And when do we expect the challenge on marijuana to begin? Almost immediately?
Yeah, it should begin almost immediately. I think the federal government may be one of the first to challenge this. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because there are marijuana proponents here who say that they're going to make a case of it. They're going to start using marijuana immediately. In fact, in some parts of California, there are pot parties going on right now in celebration of the passage of this initiative.
And on Proposition 209, which ends affirmative action for public institutions and public hiring, we saw some numbers earlier tonight that the Latinos and African Americans were voting in overwhelming numbers to reject the idea of 209. Do you think that you'll see in California greater racial polarization than you're already witnessing out there, which is considerable?
There is a racial divide in this state that is as deep and as long as the San Andreas Fault. And it's going to be interesting to see what the passage of 209 does to that racial divide in this state.
All right, thank you very much. George Lewis in California tonight. And it seems to me that California, once again, Tim Russert, is going to be on the cutting edge of some of these social issues around the country. The use of marijuana, but this whole business about affirmative action, that could start something that could take us all the way to the turn of the century. A lot of other states will say, listen, if they can do it, so can we, because it's a great undercurrent in America. It's time to end affirmative action in the eyes of a lot of, especially white male blue-collar workers and others.
And Bob Dole was able to get Jack Kemp to come over to his side on that particular issue, Tom. You know, on this drug issue, Bob Dole tried repeatedly to say that his policy on drugs would be tougher than Bill Clinton's. Interesting distinction in the voting in California. Talk about a cultural divide. People who voted for Bill Clinton for president voted to allow marijuana use 63 to 32. People who voted for Bob Dole, 23 in favor, 61 against.
We'll be back in just a moment here on Decision 96 on NBC.
From NBC News, Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
We're back here in our Stravinsky Firebird suite, NBC News election headquarters tonight. We want to show you what is going on around the country. Bill Clinton has been re-elected president of the United States. We're now approaching 80% of the precincts. The vote has been counted there. Bill Clinton holding steady at 50%. He would like to stay at least at that, if not a tick or two higher. And Ross Perot is not able to get into double digits this time. So this is the national map as it's colored in. Just a few states left outstanding: Colorado, Nevada, and Montana, and the state of Georgia, which Bill Clinton won 4 years ago. Bill Clinton has 375 electoral votes, as you can see, a much more than 2-to-1 margin over Bob Dole, almost 3-to-1, in fact, at that point. And he only needed 270 to win, so he gets 4 more years at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. In Colorado, we're now approaching 2/3 of the precincts counted, and of those, Bob Dole has 47% of the vote, Bill Clinton 44%. So Dole has a lead, as you can see, of about 23,000 votes. In Georgia, we're now approaching the 90% mark in precincts counted, and it is virtually a dead heat. Less than 20,000 votes between the two men. Ross Perot back at 7 points, so that's going to be a very close race, go right to the wire. In Montana, Bill Clinton won there 4 years ago. He'd like very much to get back in that column again. We're about halfway through the counting of the precincts now, and as you can see, Bob Dole has a 2,000 vote lead over Bill Clinton. Here's what's going on in Nevada. Again, almost a mirror situation. Bill Clinton just up a point over Bob Dole. Again, about 1,000 votes separating him there, with 44% of the precincts counted so far. Tim, Ross Perot has not hit double digits in any of those states.
Tom, I'm just looking at those numbers. In Colorado and Nevada, those states went for Bill Clinton in 1992 because Ross Perot got 26 and 23% respectively.
Drained it off, right?
Absolutely right. And by doing only half of that, he's giving Bob Dole a chance to carry those states in 1996.
Okay. NBC's Brian Williams is still out there. He's in his command chair, and he has with him now his chief financial officer, Mike Jensen. And I presume, gentlemen, that we'll be talking about what the market is likely to do tomorrow. There was a lot of concern, I know, that if the Democrats regain control of the Congress in this overheated market, there would be a big sell-off.
Very big sell-off. I spent most of the evening down on Wall Street, in the Wall Street area, and there are a bunch of very happy campers down there. The main thing that has powered this stock market rise up past the 6,000 mark has been the expectation that, number one, Bill Clinton would win, number two, that the Republicans would retain control of both the Senate and the House. So I don't think we can expect to see a big surge on Wall Street as a result of this, because the market had already taken that into account. In the terms of Wall Street, it had discounted all of that. On the other hand, as you suggest, Tom, if that had not been the case, if this had been an enormous Clinton sweep, and if the Democrats had taken the House and the Senate, then a lot of people on Wall Street were predicting that that could knock the market down 5% or 300 points, not all in one day, but in a fairly short order. So this is considered good news on Wall Street. They think it means that there will probably be further reduction in the deficit, that there will be a kind of a check and balance on Wall Street. And I think the only thing that the Wall Street community would like better would be if there were no Washington at all, if it suddenly would self-destruct, and then the market would go up about another 3,000 points.
Brian Williams, I have a question. You've been covering the Clinton White House for some time. Do you think that there is any more heroic figure, however not very visible, than Bob Rubin, who's the Treasury Secretary?
That's an interesting question. He is one of those who is said to, he has an out. He can always go back to private industry, but he is said to like this job right now. Bob Rubin is the quietest operator, perhaps, in the Clinton cabinet. Personal fortune, depending on whose count you believe, estimated between, $50 and $100 million. Former head of Goldman Sachs, an extraordinarily capable man, extraordinarily quiet operator. He runs a dual marriage, really, in two cities, New York and Washington, lives part of the week out of Washington, D.C., terribly kind to his personal assistants, all of them to a person will tell you, and yet his accomplishments, he's not one to blow his own horn. The president has often spoken very highly of him. Anyone having to do with finance in the administration speaks very highly of Bob Rubin, who took a big chance back when we were talking about the Mexican peso. So I think the assumption underneath your question is correct, and Rubin, by most rational standards, would probably get good marks for his part of this administration.
And let me just add to that, Brian, the fact that, as we both know, Bob Rubin is the man who convinced Bill Clinton that deficit reduction should be a very big part of his program, and is therefore responsible for this relatively strong economy that we've seen for the last 4 years. A lot of people think now that Bob Rubin is going to push for some kind of a reform of the entitlement programs, which is something that is so politically sensitive that the candidates wouldn't really do anything except tiptoe around it. But he could very well be the engine behind that in a second administration.
All right, thanks very much, Brian Williams and Mike Jensen. Tim Russert, Bob Rubin is one of those people who is still trying to make up his mind about whether he sticks around for a second term, but based on recent conversations at least, I think he will. I think he kind of likes it. When Brian said, by the way, and it was an awkward phrasing, he doesn't have a dual marriage in Washington and New York. He has one marriage. He lives in Washington and Judith lives in New York.
An important clarification at 1:30 a.m. Whoever right. Mr. Rubin is.
Right.
The Clinton cabinet's worth talking about. Bob Rubin wants to stay as Secretary of Treasury, and if he wants to stay, he will stay. But there will be some open positions. Leon Panetta, Chief of Staff, leaving. George Stephanopoulos, leaving. Talk about perhaps Warren Christopher, Secretary of State, leaving. Perhaps Attorney General Reno. It's going to be a time of turbulence and change for Bill Clinton. As he learned the first term, however, Tom, he has to get that resolved in the next 6 weeks, because when he goes into January with this Republican Congress, he better have an agenda in place and ready and not have to deal with personnel matters.
That's right. He wants to find very secure people that he can get through in a hurry.
Absolutely right.
We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. At 1:40 in the morning in the East, there are some bittersweet moments for Bob Dole. This is one of them, I'm sure. In the state of Georgia, we are projecting that Bob Dole wins the state of Georgia and its 13 electoral votes. It's the home state, obviously, of Speaker Newt Gingrich. It's a southern state that Bill Clinton won 4 years ago, but not this time. Bob Dole is our projected winner, so the whole Southeast, save Florida, lines up for Bob Dole in the Republican camp. But then he misses a lot of other states as he begins to move north in New England and the industrial heartland. Bob Dole is now up to 148 electoral votes, as you can see, but still well behind Bill Clinton, who passed some time ago the threshold of 270. We're now approaching 80% of the precincts tabulated. Of those counted so far, Bill Clinton has 50% of the vote, and Bob Dole 8 points back, and that's about where we think that the spread will stay. In the Senate race in Colorado for the retiring Hank Brown Republican seat, Wayne Allard, a businessman out there, continues to hold about a 6-point lead over his Democratic challenger, but we still cannot project a winner in that race. Same is true in Oregon. About 20% of the precincts, now short of that, have been counted, just shy of that. And Tom Bruguiere is the Democratic challenger for Tom Smith, who is the state Senate chairman in Oregon. He hopes to take the seat that has been held by Mark Hatfield, but we don't. It's Gordon Smith, by the way. We don't know whether, in fact, that will happen. So there you are, Lisa. You're going to have some new faces in Washington to cover.
Certainly are, Tom, certainly, and it's especially in the Senate. In the House, it's been a great night for the incumbents. Essentially, the parties have just been switching seats with not a lot of net change yet. We think we have found the closest race in the country. It's freshman Republican John Fox in the suburbs of Philadelphia, a district full of those soccer moms. He won a couple of years ago by beating the Democrat who cast the deciding vote in favor of the Clinton tax increase. Well, tonight he allegedly has won by 10 votes, with 100% of the votes counted. That means that race certainly is headed for a runoff.
That's an interesting race. That's where Gwen Ifill was earlier this week, showing the importance of getting out the votes. So every last vote that they squeezed out of the district counted.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely, it did. John Fox had used the Christian Coalition. Various other groups were in there trying to help him, and organized labor was working on the other side.
All right, Lisa, we're going to project a winner in Colorado. Hank Brown, a Republican retiring, and Wayne Allard, Colorado businessman. We are projecting he is the winner of that seat, so the Republicans hang on to it. We'll show you now what we've got in the United States Senate. The Republicans had a 6-vote margin going into tonight. They could very well improve on that. They're up 2 votes right now. We show the Republicans with 54 votes in the U.S. Senate and 45 for the Democrats. Charlie Cook, we introduced him earlier. He's one of those wizards in Washington who keeps track of this on a full-time basis, never grows tired of it. And Charlie, as you look at the House tonight, what's your latest thought?
Well, we're still pretty tired, though. What's very interesting, Lisa was exactly right. This is a good night for incumbents, and particularly for the freshmen. So far, only 6 Republican freshmen have lost and 3 veterans. And we're looking at about another 20 freshman races that have yet to be settled. But it looks like Republicans are going to hold on to the House, and the reason is they held with their freshmen. And that was their most vulnerable point, and they're doing very, very well, better than most of us really expected they would.
Charlie, is there a defining issue in this campaign so far as you can tell?
Well, I think that the extremism or the allegation of Republican extremism early on hurt them badly, but they recovered just enough over the summer. I think when they passed minimum wage, welfare reform, safe drinking water, welfare reform, immigration reform, those kinds of things, I think they sort of they picked themselves up and started moving back to the middle just in time and made it. I think if they had recovered maybe a month or 2 earlier, they wouldn't have made it.
One of Newt Gingrich's guys told me that he thinks that the Democrats made a mistake, especially the AFL-CIO, by going after Newt Gingrich too hard, too early. They had nothing left for the closing days of the campaign, so when the Republicans made their last media buys, their last advertising buys, they could outshout him by a factor of 1.5 or 2 to 1.
That might have been it. And also, Speaker Gingrich's role in the campaign seemed to have really dropped in the last month or so. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's because they started too early, or maybe some of these other issues sort of Democrats got lost in their message. I mean, we were thinking a month or so ago we were hearing about Medicare and environment and education and issues like that. And in the last 3 or 4 weeks, Democrats seem to lose their message and lose their edge. I was talking to one Republican strategist who thought as of October 10th that they might lose 18 seats, which would be one short of a majority. That was sort of when they hit their low water mark and been coming back ever since.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie Cook tonight. Let's talk with Tim Russert, if we can, for just a moment about voter turnout. Tim, it's going to be under 50%, it looks like.
Yeah, that's not good news for the Democrats,
No.
Tom. I think the Democrats would have done a lot better in these House and Senate races if their people had turned out in force. Now I want to pick up something that Charlie said about labor unions. It was not a stealth campaign. It was a very visible one.
Right.
$36 million, Tom, and they targeted 40 races. It looks like they won 6. When I grew up, there was a famous TV show called The $6 Million Man. Right. That's what it costs for each of the defeats for Republicans for the labor unions tonight.
Yeah, it's outrageous what the money is spent. And it's not just the labor unions. It's happening on both sides of the political aisle. They're spending $8 to $10 a vote on some of these races.
But, you know, that's an interesting point. The labor unions said do this. The Republicans said don't vote for the liberals. Right. And all the pundits made predictions. The voters tonight did what they wanted to do. They voted for Bill Clinton in Maine, and then 25% of them switched and voted for a Republican senator. All across the country, it was pick and choose who we want to do and forget all this outside influence.
And that's why we love it, folks. I mean, that's why this is such a great game, and it's a definition of who we are and why it's important every 2 to 4 years. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this.
Decision 96, Election Night continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
Well, by now we know the case has been settled. The numbers are not all in, but Bill Clinton will be serving a second term as president of the United States. The Republicans will keep control of the Senate and the House, it appears. The exact numbers we cannot yet say. There's probably been a diminution for Speaker Newt Gingrich in terms of his majority in the House of Representatives, but he'll have more representatives than the Democrats. But what about Bill Clinton? What about his future? Let's go into one area now. NBC's Pete Williams covers the Justice Department for us, and tonight Pete has been thinking a little bit about both the Attorney General, Janet Reno, about whether she wants to stick around, and the future of the Supreme Court. Pete, let's begin with Janet Reno. She does want to stay in that job, I gather.
Very much so, and she has said so twice when we've asked her about it. She said it's, of course, up to the president, but she likes the job and would like to stay in it.
And what about the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, Tom, you know, it's basically a conservative court right now, but if you look at the issues that divide America, it's conservative only by the barest of majorities. If you look at abortion rights, at affirmative action, term limits, voting rights for blacks in the South, most of those decisions have been made by just 5-4 decisions. So in theory, Bill Clinton, if he gets any appointments in this term, could change the ideological balance. The big if is somebody has to leave the court first to make a vacancy so that he can appoint somebody to fill it. Now, who are the likely people to leave? The speculation, of course, continues to be that it could be the Chief Justice William Rehnquist. He's served the longest on the court. He's been on for 24 years. He's 72 years old, but his health seems to be pretty good right now, so he may stay. John Paul Stevens is next in line in seniority. He's been on the court for 21 years. He's the court's oldest justice. He's 76. And then next down in seniority, and another possible person who could leave, is Sandra Day O'Connor, 15 years on the court, 66 years old. But they're all in good health. They may stay. Now, if they leave, what might happen? Well, if O'Connor leaves, the betting is, this is based on conversations with people who advise the president, that he'd be strongly tempted to appoint a woman to replace her. Even though he could say, I've already appointed one woman, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but the temptation would be strong for him to appoint another. And there, the possibility, again, Tom, is Janet Reno. She could be an appointment, Clinton advisors say. So could be Judith Kaye, who is the chief judge of New York's highest court. Now, what if it's Rehnquist or Stevens who steps down? Well, again, Clinton advisors say he may be tempted to make a little history here and appoint the first Hispanic to the Supreme Court. They say it's their turn, that this is a growing part of the U.S. population, and there ought to be an Hispanic on the court. And then finally, the people who advise the president, former legal advisors, say he's always thought a lot about putting somebody on the court like Earl Warren, someone who comes not from the judge ranks, not from the federal bench, but from the political branch. Someone like possibly George Mitchell, the former Senate Majority Leader, who was dangled the possibility of a Supreme Court nomination once before, and Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt. Now, one other thing, Tom. If it's William Rehnquist who steps down, that creates, in essence, two vacancies, one for a justice on the court, but also for Chief Justice. Clinton could make a little history here and appoint Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the first woman Chief Justice, Tom.
And Pete, how much of a role do you think that Al Gore will have in the selection process? He obviously wants to run in 2000. He doesn't want the president to do something that's going to make that job more difficult for him.
My sense, Tom, is that actually he'd have very little role for this reason. Bill Clinton prides himself on the fact that he's a law student, a lawyer, studied constitutional law, and taught constitutional law. He cares a lot about the Supreme Court. I think this decision is very much his and his alone.
All right, thanks very much, Pete Williams. A little preview of what we may be able to expect in terms of who runs the Justice Department and what happens to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want to remind you that some stations will be cutting away from us momentarily, but we will continue with our coverage throughout the evening. Election 96 is now complete in terms of the voting, but there's still tabulation going on out there as we try to determine what the final makeup of the House of Representatives will be, for that matter, for the U.S. Senate as well. Bill Clinton reelected, Republicans still running Congress, it appears, but the devil is in the details in the final numbers. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 in a moment. And we're back right away here on NBC. And standing by now, having freshly completed over the weekend the New York City Marathon, NBC's chief diplomatic correspondent Andrea Mitchell, looking refreshed and ready to go for another 4 years on the fast track of diplomatic reporting. Andrea, Bill Clinton going to be any more interested in foreign policy in the next 4 years than he has been in the past?
Good morning, Tom. I think he's going to have to be, because he's been sweeping all of these problems aside and trying to postpone that reality. Only later today we're going to hear from the NATO commanders that they've got 4 options for staying in Bosnia, and all of them include using American troops. This from the White House that promised that Americans would be out by the end of December. So there are a lot of problems. We're told now that Russian President Boris Yeltsin has regained consciousness after his quintuple bypass operation, that he has retaken control over the nuclear arsenal. But as you know, there is a power vacuum in Russia and economic disaster. There were strikes in the streets today and yesterday. So there are a lot of problems in Russia, problems in the Middle East, new terrorist warnings today in Saudi Arabia and Paraguay against Americans. Inevitably, a big change in China with Deng Xiaoping. I mean, eventually he's going to die, and probably during the second term for Bill Clinton. So I don't think he's going to be able to delay the inevitable in foreign policy, and he's going to have to confront it.
He's about to leave on a trip for Asia, right?
Exactly. He's leaving for a trip to Asia. Well, he will meet with the Chinese Prime Minister, but he would like to go to China at some point, but hasn't been able to because of all of the human rights difficulties. But Warren Christopher is going to go to China later this month. And we're just learning, by the way, today, reluctantly from the White House, that the president, less than a month ago, met with one of the chief Indonesian leaders of Chinese background to discuss Chinese policy with this man, James Riyadi, who is from the Lippo conglomerate that contributed all of this money. So there are a lot of problems with foreign donations as well.
All right, thanks very much, Andrea Mitchell. You'll be keeping busy in the coming months, but then we know now that you're in very good shape, obviously, because you completed that New York City Marathon. Once again, our congratulations for that. It's still ahead for Tim Russert, of course, the New York City Marathon, but he's going to go into training tomorrow morning. Let's talk about what we've been through here tonight in the closing moments of Election 96. I think it was at about 9 o'clock tonight that I said 2 years ago about this week, Bill Clinton was wandering the halls of the White House talking to himself. He's never a man who thinks that his political career is over, but that's about as far down as he could possibly have gotten. The Republicans swept in. Newt Gingrich was on the cover of Time magazine. They were talking about a Republican revolution going well into the 21st century. Of Clinton tried to explain it to a kind of amused press corps when he held a news conference, and he just wandered off the political landscape. Now he's back. He's won. He's won impressively across the country. He's reduced the Republican margin in the House of Representatives, and he has 4 years to be his own man, Tim.
And yet his fortunes are still intertwined with Newt Gingrich. Think of this, Tom. Bill Clinton's incompetence or liberalism, take your choice, in the first 2 years created Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich comes in, and his excessiveness recreated the re-election of Bill Clinton. Now what do? Hold hands and go off the cliff together? Or do they try to come together, realizing it's in their both political interest and the country's interest to try to achieve some success and still have philosophical differences? This election we saw, it was a tactical election. It was not an agenda election. Neither of these men have a mandate.
Yeah, let's ask some of our other colleagues about that as well. I happen to agree with that, by the way, that there was no great vision outlined by anybody here. They were just trying to get elected. So let's ask NBC's Gwen Ifill. You've been covering politics for a long time down there in Washington. What are the chances that Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton can get together and find some kind of a common agenda, Gwen?
A long time here in Washington, much longer tonight. Bill Clinton decided, you said he was wandering the halls of the White House talking to himself 2 years ago. A year ago, he decided he was going to win re-election by being Ronald Reagan. He ran to the middle. He decided he was going to be the champion of the V chip. He was going to say violence was bad for children. He decided he was going to sign welfare reform. He was going to pose with cops in blue uniforms as often as he could. And the discipline and some luck, that is the economy doing so well, helped him get reelected, which has nothing to do with how you governed, which is what happens next with him and Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich is far less popular right now than Bill Clinton is. So Bill Clinton has an advantage that he didn't have 2 years ago when Newt Gingrich came in with all the promise of an imagined mandate. Bill Clinton, I think, knows enough to know by now that nobody gets a mandate anymore, and that he's just got to show up, he's got to do the job, he's got to stay in the middle if he doesn't get pulled to the left or the right by various investigations and other problems.
Brian Williams, you're leaving your post as the chief White House correspondent, but you've been covering Bill Clinton for a long, long time now. How do you think he'll approach Newt Gingrich?
Well, Bill Clinton wants an unfiltered, unfettered, uncorrupted second term. He's probably not going to get that because all of his prior problems are going to chase him. The point Tim made earlier is these two guys have a twin set of problems, really, but they can't fix it because of the point you made, because that would reek of politics as usual. The president is very good at olive branches. He, again, is going to be doing this one for the record books for the legacy. So he approaches Newt Gingrich, if you ask Bill Clinton, from a position of strength, saying, look, if I didn't get 50, I came very, very close, and we saw what happened to your ranks in the House. Newt Gingrich, it's been said, made the tactical error of appointing himself as America's community college history professor. He started every sentence with the word look, which to a lot of Americans is very off-putting. He was always the smartest kid in the class, got to Washington and discovered there were a lot of kids smarter than he was. Tom?
Look, Brian, you've done very well tonight, and we appreciate it. Now let's go to NBC's David Bloom, who's been covering the Dole campaign. David Bloom, there in the empty quarters. You've crisscrossed this country. What do you think Americans want from Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich and Trent Lott, three Southern white boys, three baby boomers who are going to be running the country from the Senate, the House, and the presidency? Very quickly, David.
I think the point, Tom, is that, as you said, no vision articulated by Bob Dole. He will be remembered as perhaps one of the most enduring politicians of the second half of this century, and yet what the American people did tonight is say, we like what we've got already.
All right, thanks very much. Well done, David, and well done to all of the folks at NBC, not just those out here, but all the folks behind the scenes as well. We couldn't have done it without them. Another election, and we've got more coverage coming tomorrow because your future is still ahead. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News in New York. Thanks very much for watching tonight.